going to go ahead and get started again. The item that we're on right now is cemetery sexton. So Kim and Larry asked that this item be on the agenda. Larry's not here.
This meeting is being recorded.
Kim, you want to start us off in this conversation?
Yeah, so obviously our unit has acquired a cemetery. I know that there's been other cemeteries that have been acquired throughout our units as well. They currently are under facilities, and I just don't think it would be appropriate to have facilities conduct everything for the cemeteries that they need. For instance, we need to figure out, I don't know what we need to do, but there obviously has to be points of contact for people who are going to obtain records of who is currently buried in the cemeteries currently. That's going to be an issue with the one in Unit 4, I know that. Who's going to maintain the records of those who are within the cemeteries? Figuring out how to maintain them beyond the basic facilities maintaining, and obviously figuring out who is going to be the contacts, who the process for any tribal members who are looking at being buried into those cemeteries, what that process is going to look like. I know Andrew had an email attached, Lana had attached Andrew's email into the board workshop of some of his concerns as well. So I don't really know where to start, but I know something needs to be done and needs to be figured out.
Okay, any questions or comments from the board to get us going?
No, that's a great point. I know that the Indian Cemetery in Hessel, that there are individuals that are buried there, and we definitely need to get as many elder input as we can on, because there's people that are buried there that nobody knows who they are. And so.
Which one are you talking about, Wakefield or?
No, the one that's right next to the.
Italian cemetery?
Nope, that's right next to the Snow Church there, that Catholic church. That the township doesn't know either, because the township, there was some back and forth with ownership of that. So I definitely think we tried to find somebody to get those records going, get some history, as well as making sure that this never has to be questioned again going forward. So I think we need to have that conversation, like you said, who, what, when, where. Maybe Andrew's got some suggestions on that, so that's all.
Okay, Sean?
On 134 that Russ Rickley takes care of, in talking to him, he has to deal at least 5 times with a person. The initial phone call, meeting them at the cemetery, getting the funeral arrangements. I don't believe he gets paid anything. I've asked him about that before. We have a spring cleanup and a fall cleanup up there every year, and whatever he needs, like black dirt or anything, I usually get around it and get him that free of charge. Grading the driveway is kind of taken care of, but as both Kim stated, that, yeah, I think the whole process needs to be looked at and see what we can come up with.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Tyler?
Yeah, my question, I guess, is like, what are the recommendations, or are you just asking, you're bringing this to the table to make light of it? Kim Hampton.
Sorry. So to make light of it, but I don't know the first step. I don't know if we have to create some sort of, I don't know, a specific role for like East End, another person for the West End under facilities to handle all of this. I just know right now the cemetery that's in Unit 4, there are so many unmarked spots where we know people are, we don't know who they are. The township there also does not know who anybody is. When they were there, we need somebody to be, looking into that stuff and making the correct contacts, but then also it needs to be a role, because like Sean said, if that person will probably be in contact with families or funeral homes, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times before it's even done with, specifically each case. So are we able to find funding? Is there funding somewhere to create a role for the West End and a role for the East End to take care of all of that? Or does it just need to be one specific person to cover everything? So I'm looking for input, ideas, and what our options might be.
I'll tell you, you know my stance that I don't think the East End taking care of anything will be efficient for West End resources. For instance, Stacy has recently departed the cultural, her position in the West End cultural, and pretty much everything I had planned had stopped.
I can agree.
There is no follow-up, there is no communication, there's nothing. So I agree with you, this doesn't belong in facilities. It just seems outside their scope. Other than property maintenance, I think taking care of the actual records is not a facilities thing. So I would agree with you on that one, but I also think there needs to be parity. Just seeing, you know, it come to light so quickly with Stacy leaving and us being right back where we started, you know, relying on the East End for help and not having it. So I would support you on this. You know, I don't think there's any plans to get a burial ground in my area anytime soon, but still I think, you know, like it's going to be very difficult for somebody to go back and forth and give you the attention that you need. So I would support it. I think we just need to figure out how to do, I have no idea how to do this, but thank you.
Could it be a new position within like culture of like repatriation?
Potentially, if you're asking me, Kim, I'm not sure who you're talking to, but potentially.
Anybody?
Okay. All right, so I kind of have a long list. I have Mike, Aaron, Lana, Rob, Kimley.
What I was going to suggest is that we do have a cemetery ordinance, but it only is kind of aimed at Waywalk, and we might need to broaden that and then get suggestions from them since they're already running one. And now that Waywalk's under our control now too, we're going to need parameters, we're going to need rules. This is how burial sites are going to work. And so I think we need to do a kind of like an in-depth dive and find out from them maybe what their recommendations are. Maybe we look at doing subcommittees for the cemeteries too, because I think there's a lot of work there. It's not going to be just one person. They're going to need help, like cleanup days. They're going to need all that kind of some support system too. So we have a committee going. I think that tap into that resource, find out what their needs are for we can get it right, and then maybe do an umbrella where we can include all the cemeteries under the cemetery ordinance and address it that way. And if we needed a position to do it, then it's something we're probably going to have to cross. Yield.
Aaron.
So, so the history of it is, and maybe we'll go in a positive direction, is for years we, well, first of all, Waywalk is where a lot of our people are buried, and over the years we've tried to get help for that, but it's always been a big no. And then Denny was volunteer. Denny didn't get compensated at all. Occasionally, you know, we would get a request for a little bit of work from Sioux Tribe Construction that I would just say, go ahead, if you guys got the time, go ahead, but nothing formal. Then we migrated over to Gem Island Cemetery, and we tried to get support for Gem Island Cemetery, which we never did really get anything of significance, although we did have out of repatriation, Cecil's cooperation, kind of as a volunteer, because some of the family members up there are his family members. And then when Waywalk came along, well, we also had Indian Point Cemetery. I've got some family buried there as well. But then when Waywalk came, it turned into this big, ugly political battle, like, why are we doing this? And it is an Indian cemetery. Before it was ever a Catholic cemetery, it was an Indian cemetery. We got that confirmed with some old grave sites. But because of that, the politics, the pushback, we ended up having to do a volunteer approach. And so, you know, and the success of it is largely because Russ Rickley does it as a volunteer, and we have volunteers that work out there. So I think that it's time for us to take a step in the right direction and establish some core service. So having facilities, I do think having facilities, that part of it being placed in facilities makes sense, but I think the cultural aspect of it, that's something we've never crossed that threshold. When I was at the Huron Band, because I remember all the struggles we had with Gem Island and Wilwalk, and by the way, right now, there isn't anybody that's doing the kind of work at Wilwalk that Denny was doing since Denny's been gone. Some family members are volunteering to do like their part of it, but not the whole part. But when I was at Huron Band, I encouraged the council to create a cemeteries committee, and it's a memoriam committee. So it's not just cemeteries. And it's placed in relations with their repatriation, and also they have an honor guard. They also have an honor guard, which we don't have. And so, this is going to increase. I mean, and we should be interested whenever we find where our people are buried and there's an interest in them letting us have some role and responsibility in it, then I think we should grab that. Now, that means we should budget for the facilities part of it, but also the grounds part of it, but also to make sure that we're doing everything culturally appropriate, that it's connected with repatriation, and that we have a repository of, what's available, so that when people make a request to be buried there, that it's got some kind of a formal process rather than an informal process. So, and when we do it, it's going to open up the door to other locations, but that's not a bad thing, because we should have a role and responsibility where our people are placed so that we can make sure that it's appropriate, that they never get unearthed. If it goes into private property, the federal laws to protect Indian remains do not apply in private property. And so we've had risks of that at different times. So it's time for us to take a step in the direction and have a holistic approach and a comprehensive approach across all of our cemeteries. And that means probably some staffing.
Okay, Lana, Rob, then Kimley.
Yeah, I completely agree with Mike and Aaron's comments. This isn't the first time we had talked about that. I know that in the past, such as Mr. Rickley that takes care of St. Agnes, he's done it on a volunteer basis. That's been over a decade, isn't it? It's been a long time. And we've brought back to the table in order to maybe, and he's never asked me or asked for it, but in order to compensate him, there's a lot of work there. It never moved past anything. So it is time that we mirror, and get his input and figure out what he has done and what it would take. I definitely support a paid position, because there's many cemeteries. And I thought that in the past we had said that, there was going to be, repatriation possibly, because those are remains there. And culture, we're going to work towards something. Nothing ever moved, nothing ever went anywhere. And then if we do have this as a paid position, or, an expert, and then we get sextons for each area, and pay a small honorarium or whatever to them, but we have an expert that can go to these townships and sit down, even the ones that we don't have acquired, sit down with their clerks or whoever does it and say, let me help you out. This is, we'll start identifying these people. Because I've sat with ours down in Clark Township and reached out to families that so with an expert, though, would definitely help. So that's something I completely, fully support, in starting with the ones we already have in place, and that's, Russ Rickley that's been doing it. So that's what I have to say. I support moving in that direction.
Rob, do you have a question, Andrew?
I did talk to Russ just this past Monday. He came up to my office last week, and we discussed some of the issues that we're having in the other cemeteries. And he did say that he would happily come discuss with you guys, if you want him to, what the procedures are that he's developed, because he's worked very hard to develop the Wet'weok into what it is now, and he understands that these other cemeteries don't necessarily have anything. They're starting from scratch, and he's willing to share his knowledge and his experience in it But that's pretty much all I was going to add to the conversation.
Okay. Rob, then Kimley.
Pretty much everything I was going to say was going to be covered. I was just going to bring up, like Mike did, the committee that already exists, that we can mirror a lot of things from there. I think it just needs a budget, and it sounds like we're going to need a couple different department involvement, which I'm fine with. I don't know if it needs to be under repatriation or facilities. I think both need to be involved, but I don't think it should be too difficult. I think just sit down with the committees and then bring in Mr. Rickley. I'd like to hear what he has to say, but I think it should be pretty straightforward on what we need to do here.
Okay, Kimley.
What is our process right now for when somebody passes away? Who helps them with, I guess, that process, like Naganagic, or what does that look like? Is it our cultural department that kind of walks them through that process?
It's hit and miss, though.
So it depends what you're talking about, what service. So obviously we have Native American funerals at the Naganagic, that's under the cultural department. We have funeral assistance, that's through ACFS. You know, if you want to potentially be buried at one of these cemeteries, that's under facilities. So there's not like a central hub that manages all the services that we provide once someone passes on.
Okay, because clearly, anywhere else has got a director of said operations that kind of ties everything together. That'd be a funeral director at any other location, and they usually have a half a dozen employees underneath of them that manage the paperwork side of that. So we definitely need to get multiple people in the room. And as far as, again, people don't know where to go or what to do or who to, they hope to get the right person on the phone to maybe guide them. But we definitely, I think, need to create a position between probably what a funeral director is in repatriation, and get all of those people in the room, and whether or not that's something we have to look at budgeting for. I mean, we need to make sure that our loved ones are taken care of, and we need to make sure that we know where people are and that we're protecting them. So, I mean, this is a much, I think, bigger conversation that we need to get a lot of departments on a workshop and open that door up on what is the best way to do that and how to move forward to make sure that we're caring for those who made sure we were all here. So that's all.
Isaac?
I don't think we need to hire any more people. The tribe's got a lot of people. We just got to give them some direction, what needs to be done. I mean, funeral planning's not that difficult. All you need is a list of names and numbers to make some phone calls. But the problem I see with the tribe is a lot of people always have other things to do, it seems like. But trying to get the basic stuff done takes forever. I mean, we'll sit here and talk about this, and let's see, we'll probably talk about it again, and maybe when I'm not here. Hey, Andrew, Wilwalk looks great, Powell Grounds looks great. Now, Gem Island is taken care of by volunteers, I know you do a lot with the mowing the grass and everything. The only thing Wilwalk needs, and I'm gonna donate my equipment, I have a dump truck and bulldozer. I'd like to get some limestone to put on the drive, because it's all sand and it gets muddy. So whenever you can tell me where to pick it up, I'll pay for my own ferry, I'll pay for my own fuel, whatever it takes, and I'll spread it all.
We have a pit.
I don't really want to drive out to Red Yard, though. Just let me know when you want to get that done. And, hey, I think your crew's doing a good job.
Aaron?
Want to, create, a big traumatic argument but I think that, I agree with Isaac that we do have some staff. We need to see whether or not it's additional staff that we need, but placement of this, I don't think it will work if it's in cultural, as culture is currently constructed. Because I will tell you, and Christine knows this, for the time that I was out of office, and even today, when somebody has a funeral, and I tell them to call cultural, they can never get through. So luckily, I have Tyler's cell number, and then I just call Tyler. I've given up on having any hope that culture will have a personal commitment for cultural reasons. And Tyler does a good job. But we need something other than that. And I do think some of this could be well placed under legal. Over the years, we've argued back and forth whether it should be under cultural or under legal, because repatriation is a specific thing. If culture was operating the way that it should, culture would be the logical placement for it. But that's not, I don't think it will be a disservice to try to respectfully work with our family members in their time of need, or even just their ancestors, where their ancestors are buried, until that whole thing gets fixed. And I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So we need to think about alternately, if we do create a function, where that's going to be appropriately placed so it's done respectfully. So, and I did that as respectfully as I could do it without throwing anybody under the bus.
Okay, so I have Kim Gravel, Tyler, Lana, and Kimley.
I missed the beginning of the conversation, so from what I was looking at earlier, are we looking for a sexton, or are we looking for someone to walk people through the process once a loved one dies? So it's both. So I'd say let's.
So Kim, it sounds like the conversation changes.
Yeah,
It sounds like, Kim was introducing it for Sexton, but then we identified that improvements could be made at the other properties as well. So it sounds like we need to have a workshop. We need to have various different departments in the tribe, and the sentiment is we want to improve those properties, but what's that look like? Do we have the capacity to assign duties to staff that we already have to make it better? Do we have to hire positions? Do we have to contract certain services out? Like, do we need to have a paid groundskeeper, or can we hire Best Lawn Service to go over there once a week and knock it down? I don't know, but we have to have that
You
conversation.
can get people, what we do down in the payment cemetery, because it's on private property, but almost everyone buried there is tribal. We get the orange suits, what do you call them, from the Chippewa County? Work release, orange suits. And they come down and do that sometimes, so, I mean, that's a thought too, because they got to get in their hours, so.
Probation, we
I'd
have
love
people
to
on
be on
probation in
that
tribal court as well,
committee
there's a
to-
couple different options.
Yeah, to
So
do
maybe
this.
when we have that workshop, we should have those committee members here as well. Just to give their
Okay, I'll
feedback.
wait till then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tyler?
Yeah, so, I don't know, I don't think there's going to be an issue with Andrew's team. Andrew's done a great job with our facilities maintenance. That's what I'm saying. I don't think this should be put on his plate. Facilities, like groundskeeping, things like that, sure, yeah, that's great. But, I mean, this is like having a cultural sexton, maybe not in the cultural department, but as a government service is probably beneficial, because it's great to have those records, to find out that there's unmarked graves and people don't have documentation of who's in those. That's a little concerning in and of itself. But ultimately, I'm also looking at it as something that can expedite and facilitate a process, because when somebody passes away or walks on, it's not easy for the family to just deal with it. It's not as easy as just organizing a funeral. It's not that easy, because then they're like, well, how do I get my funeral assistance? And you have to steer them towards ACFS. And then they're like, well, how do we use a cultural facility or get a medicine man? And then you have to do either steer them towards cultural or steer them towards traditional medicine. So having somebody that can do the paperwork, maintain the records, and you almost operate as soon as you call this person, they reach out to all of these different departments that actually integrate with our cultural service or our cultural funeral services. I think it would be beneficial. It's a discussion worth having, how it's going to look, where we're going to put it. I agree with many of you on this one. We got to figure out where to put the position, but I think the position is, and if you're saying we have enough people and they're not all working well, we can transfer them over. I looked up the average sexton gets paid about $35,000 a year, so it's a decent salary to start. I'm sure somebody would love to move into that position from another position that they may not care for. But I'm fully supportive of this. I think it's long beyond time that we utilize this, not only, because it's to keep the records, but to help our membership, deal with the funeral services, because it's not easy. I just had a member lose someone and they're just struggling, like they're struggling to find wood, to just maintain, because when you lose a kid, it's not easy. And to navigate our tribal system, they just wanted to give up. They didn't want to do the tribal system because there's so many different phone calls they had to make. Why make it so difficult on our people when we can, what Kim Hampton is proposing, it makes sense, it's an efficiency, and it will help our people in the long run. Not only help our people, it'll help us, help our people, because then everything will be centralized and no phone numbers will get missed. A lot of times when somebody calls, hey, what services are available to you? And you tell them the services off the top of your head are available, and then you're just like, oh, I forgot this, and this, and everybody's busy, you can't connect again. So, yeah, I'm fully supportive of moving this forward, and I think we should definitely dedicate some workshop time and pull all of the divisions in to that workshop that are any way, shape, or form affiliated with end of life or funeral services.
Okay, Atlanta.
Yeah, I agree with most of what everybody said. And again, it's not a new topic. We've talked about it for a very long time. And, Kim and Larry are bringing up, the issue that they have in their unit with getting someone to care for a cemetery. But, we've heard these same problems for the past years and years. You call, you try to guide someone through, and people don't answer their phone. You have to connect as a board member to represent people, really. Aaron made the comment, I have Tyler's home number. That's what it takes. That's what it takes for us to pick up the phone and actually call these people ourselves, because people aren't answering. And it's not the first time that we've asked for some kind of recommendations on how to move forward for a one-stop shop on, Tyler explained it perfectly. For the application, you got to contact one department. For, getting some drum, you got to contact another department. We've asked that there be a list of contacts. I don't know if they've ever gotten that, but it is definitely long overdue. We claim that, we repatriation and culture, but we don't even have this figured out yet. And this isn't the first conversation we've had about it, I can tell you that. So I think it's going to take a position, or it's going to take some direction. Like Isaac said, we have people there. Maybe get them knowledgeable people that we have in some of those places, and have them come up with some recommendations on what we should do moving forward to highlight all those problems we just identified. But from this table here, Isaac also said it, from this table here, how does that direction get moved down? Move down to say that something's going to happen, because I know in sitting at this table, it's not the first time we talked about it. So what's going to change today? We all love the idea of making it easier and for us to be able to, assist our tribal members in the most difficult time they have, or even, burying at NEMA, there's nobody to really, help them out. So what's going to change? I mean, that we're not going to have this conversation again in 6 months or a year.
Well, the change is we have to schedule the workshop, and at the end of the day, we have to allocate resources, because it sounds like they're going to need some. So if that means assigning duties to the staff that we have, but the big thing is we're going to have to approve a budget. So after we have that workshop, someone's going to have to take the initiative and create a resolution to make it actionable, give them what they need to make those properties better. If that means staff, if it means contracting out for different groundskeepers, whatever it is, the buck stops with us. We have to do the work. Kim Lee, Rob, then Kim Hampton.
Just a point of clarification there. This is much bigger than, we have, like, going back to Isaac's comment, that we have a repatriation, we have cultural, we have facilities, we have all of these things in place right now. So it simply isn't, the board's got to pass a budget. We have to figure, people are in place for reasons, and what about starting with some recommendations from them on what we can do to bring it all together? We've asked for that before.
Absolutely. So we're going to have that workshop. We're going to have the different departments that have a stake in this game. But I've heard from multiple people that they're supportive of hiring positions. And with that, you have to pass a budget. So it depends how that conversation goes and what the board wants. But we'll probably have to create action on it.
That's the step we haven't taken.
Yep. So Kim Lee, Rob, then Kim Hampton.
Yes, we have lots of different departments that don't always work together. To me, I mean, we have membership liaisons. I think we need liaisons that tie everybody together, right? If that's the departments that we need, or to utilize what we have. But, and then that follow through of making sure that, like I said, whether that be a liaison for all the departments that we have, somebody to tie everybody together, we need an anchor. And so, yeah, because in people's time of need, it's real difficult to navigate all of that paperwork and what's going on and all of those things, especially if you don't have any resources to do so. So we need something that ties it all together. So all of those departments, whether we bring them to the table and ask them what they need, or we create a position, that be a sexton, a liaison, or we utilize what we have. But yeah, we absolutely need to address it yesterday, clearly.
Okay. Rob, then Kim Hampton.
So I think the conversation just started with the general maintenance of Sexton. It kind of changed into a full wraparound of family services for funerals. So I think we're going to be talking about two different things here. I don't think you wrap it all into one. I think one is specifically a family service, which my opinion is that ACFS does the best job at wrapping in all of the potential services or programs that could assist someone. That could be the hub of, hey, if any board members or liaisons or anyone gets a call, hey, I had a family member pass away, who do I call? Direct them to the person within ACFS. It's a family service. Here's all of the options that we have to assist your family. That's one side of it. The second side of it is maintenance of the sexton. That could be done through committee, grounds, facilities. So, but like the chair said, I think this is going to take a workshop. We bring in everyone. And I think we need to get in the habit of, when we have these discussions, because we do it all the time, where we talk about something 6 months later, it's brought back to our attention by something, and then we're stuck in the same boat. Like, well, what do we do about this? Well, we talked about it last time and didn't do anything about it. So we need to get in the habit of maybe even having legal take notes during those workshops and say, this is what the majority of the board has agreed to during this workshop. That seems reasonably logical to everyone. And then have that actually be a resolution that the majority of board members can agree on. So when we schedule this, let's just have the goal of having a workable resolution at the end of the workshop.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Kim Hampton.
So initially, it did start out just as sexton, but that wasn't all of it. So for the East End compared to the West End, it's completely different. So right now, we don't have any, culture who can come over. We don't have an Naganagijic building to do anything with. So what our process right now is literally the funeral home calls either me or another person who performs tribal funerals within our area. That's what we do. We literally have volunteers who are doing it, who have been trained to do it, and we have 3 of us. That's it. That's our only options. So there's a whole new, there's no certain thing. We have no options where we're at. And now, like Tyler said, with our West End culture coordinator resigned, we're really back to square one. What my main issue right now is we have, I'm going to have to go take pictures and, send them to the rest of the board and show you guys exactly what it looks like at Indian Point Cemetery. It is absolutely sad and heartbreaking. When I went there, it is unbelievable to just look, and all you see are indented spots everywhere. Some are marked, majority are not. And you can't tell that there's somebody there. Besides, it looks pretty clear that somebody's there. The township has no record of who they are. So my question is, who is going to be responsible or tasked to make the right connections, maybe to, the Diocese of Marquette or whoever, to find out whose remains those are and to get them properly marked. This is a matter of repatriation, because those are our people that are there, but yet we don't even know who they are. So for our end right now, you know, that's my main question. Who is going to be tasked to locate those records and to keep those records? So we do definitely need a lot more workshop time, but Lana had asked, you know, well, what's going to be any different now as compared to in past years? The main difference I can tell you for the West End, specifically Unit 4 right now, is that I'm not going to give up on this because we do have how many unmarked graves where our people are, and they deserve to be marked and recognized. And I'm not going to stop until we have a process in place.
Hey, Kim, I have a quick question before I turn to Aaron. How far is the cemetery from where we're going to be meeting, at your meeting?
The meeting in Manistee is probably a good 40, 45 minutes away.
Okay. I'm going to work with Lana to try to see if we can put a tour of that cemetery on our agenda. So we're going to be out in your parts in 2 weeks. So if we can find the time, let's do it. That way everyone can see what kind of condition it's in.
It will also depend on weather because it is literally in the middle of nowhere. And if people don't have vehicles that are going to make it in there, they're not going to make it in there until a couple more months from now.
Okay. Well, let's talk. And if it's doable, let's get it on the agenda. We'll do a tour, okay?
Okay, and I will take it upon myself to go and see what it looks like already.
Okay, sounds good. Aaron?
So what we
Thank you.
need to do, and I learned some of this, actually I remembered some of these skills that I forgot that I had, but what we need to do is we need to have a project management meeting when we discuss this. So it's not just a big bitch session or us sharing stuff and, you know, and sharing our heart and then it doesn't result in anything. Is at the end, well, first of all, through the session, we need to talk about each of the steps that we might face or that we currently face where there are holes in how we can help our people. So that's number one. Then we need to look to see what is it that we currently do versus what happens just kind of as a volunteer. So Tyler said something earlier that was a little misleading. Our funeral services. We don't have funeral services. In fact, we used to write up our staff that worked in culture that would do this stuff, because this is volunteer, it's not part of their job. They used to actually get write-ups when they would leave to go do funeral services, because it takes a lot of time and effort, right? But it kind of matches that people that work in culture, at least some people that work in culture, are also those volunteers that find the fire keepers and do all that, but none of that is part of what we do as a tribe, none of it. So it might appear to, you know, Tyler or Marquette that that's part of what we do, but it isn't. It just happens that Tyler Bouchard knows about that stuff because his father-in-law is one of our local people that does that. So I think when we talk it all out, we need to also talk about, do we want to place that responsibility on somebody as part of their job so it's formal, so it doesn't just kind of happenstance, happen sometimes it doesn't happen, or do we need to identify a couple of positions that we want to fill? But a lot of it is just happenstance. It's not organized at all. It's just slipshod, depending on whether or not you got people that know what they're doing and pull it all together, whether they're motivated. There's times when I can't get through to ACFS either. And sometimes people at ACFS are not the most polite people to talk to when somebody is, and Juanita's not here, but when somebody's grieving and they're not thinking straight. So I try my best to try to talk to the tribal member first and say, you know, here's how it works, blah, 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 blah. And somebody said membership liaisons have been very helpful over the years, but it's not, that also is not their primary responsibility. So I think when we lay all of it out, what we know that we need to be humanistic and to be a tribe in the way that we help people, then we need to say, okay, where are we going to put this? Where are we going to place this? Whose responsibility will it be? Whose job description will be changed so that they will perform those functions? And I don't think it's all going to be covered with existing costs, because I do think there's some extra things that we need to do, but I think we could probably do it effectively and efficiently. But so to take this beyond just every couple of years we talk about it, then we get in a big quandary, then we argue about it, then that unit's getting something that we're not getting. Let's figure out how to do it right for permanency, because we're all getting older, and once it's our time to be buried, we want it to be done right.
Okay, so Lana, you're going to find some workshop space that we can have an in-depth conversation about this. And present would have to be ACFS, Facilities, Cultural Department. I don't think I'm missing anybody.
I got Russ Rickley and the Weckwayak.
It's under
Committee.
cultural.
The committee that actually exists already?
Yeah,
A few people say?
Invite them too.
Okay.
Yeah, invite them too. And then invite Russ Rickley as well.
Yep.
Okay.
He's part of that committee. He's just a sexton on that committee.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Kim, go ahead.
I did my genealogy course that I had to do. I have a whole chapter on cemeteries. So I'll look through it and see if it has anything to do with what we're discussing, and also I'll bring a copy of what a sexton record looks like. Because there's a lot more to it than just writing down, a name and that. And our biggest thing on the Sugar Island Historic Society was we took the elders to the cemetery, and they showed us where there was so many unmarked graves that, and on the island, and I don't know if they'd be willing to share it with you, Denny did get a thing for engraving, what's that real hard plastic, it's a different name, composite. And if you knew where someone was buried, you stuck a stick in it with a number on it, threw everything in this bin, and someone would come pick it up, they'd put the information on, go put that on the grave. So you'd have a name and a date. Anyways, so it's something to think about, and I'll bring all that information with me when we have a workshop.
Okay, sounds good. All right, I think we're concluded with this item. All right, so let's move on to the next, which is broadband project. We have Danny here, we have Josh, and we have Larry Jocks. So let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll tackle that, guys. The item that we're currently on is the broadband project, and we have the team here that consists of Josh, Danny, and Larry Jocks. So whenever you guys are ready. Also, these gentlemen have 3 resolutions on the agenda tonight, so just like with the staff earlier today, we'll consider our time with them agenda review. So go ahead whenever you guys are ready.
Okay, the broadband group is here to answer any questions pertaining to the acceptance of the Reconnect 4 grant. That is the grant that will fund the extension from the Reconnect 3 grant, which is our current network that we're building out with Cherry Capital Connections, our operating partner. So we wanted to bring this forward. The grant is for $3,742,293. There's also a waiver of sovereign immunity to jurisdiction for the grant security agreement, and also to create the DACA account. I will bring 2 of these resolutions forward later. Bob will be bringing the DACA, and Josh will be sitting by for any questions involving legal, since they are a waiver of sovereign immunity. And Larry's here if there's any questions specific to the funding source. So we wanted to bring these forward, explain the intent, what we're doing, and take any questions.
Okay, any questions or comments from the board regarding where we're at this point with the broadband project?
Give us a little update.
Can you give the historical information, Danny, what brought us here?
Sure. We've had several workshops in regard to these grants where we now have an operating partner. We received the first grant, Reconnect 3, which was for approximately $24 million. We have accepted that. That currently is in the preliminary phases. We hope to begin construction on Reconnect 3 late spring, early summer. So the operating partner for Reconnect 3 and Reconnect 4 are the same partner. It's just an extension of that same network. So as I stated earlier, this will allow us to begin working on this grant concurrently. So we want to officially accept that. And then the goal is to hook up 400 plus tribal homes as a mandate of the grant, and then operate the network in a commercial capacity through our operating partner.
Okay, Isaac?
Hayes had mentioned in the past that you're going to apply for the BEADS grant. Where are we at with that?
Yes, I believe what we mentioned is we were considering applying for the BEADS grant. At this point,
Considering.
that we were considering applying for the BEAD grant is what I said. We were vetting the BEAD grant. So I believe I can look at my written reports, but we were considering it, yes. Our operating partner is applying for the BEAD grant, which will be an extension of this grant. They have 5 other grants they're applied for. We currently are not on the approved vendors list as an operator, so this will be one of 6 projects that they're proposing. This will be an extension of working off of this Reconnect 3, which we've high level discussed negotiating future, more financially beneficial terms for the tribe from that original agreement. So we will have a financial upside from the BEAD grant, but we will not be the applicant.
So correct me if I'm wrong, the BEAD grant would have came off our existing, the USDA fiber, right, and fed homes, additional homes?
Correct. It will build out straight to the homes, and 50%.
Why did we not, you said considered, but why didn't we apply? Because then the infrastructure would be held by somebody else and not us.
Well, we went through the pre-application process, and at this point, we are not an approved vendor. You have to be an approved vendor before you can actually bid. The bid is coming out on the 8th or 9th, that you have to have the official bid in. With that being this tight of a time frame and what would be necessary to bid on that, and the fact that Cherry Capital Connections is already approved vendor, already has bid submissions and the documents drafted for other counties, the decision was made that, and if we would have bid on it, would have been our asset, we would have had to renegotiate the terms of the Cherry Capital deal as well. Due to 50% of the households in that BEAD application will be ones that they were going to build out to with private capital, and we were going to receive a financial benefit from that. So we will renegotiate that financial benefit. So in short, it's just the fact that we are not an approved to bid on that at this point, and we don't know if we will be the tribe.
But you knew about the BEADS grant for some time.
Correct.
And what do you need to be approved vendor?
You need to submit an application to.
So we didn't submit that application.
We did, it has not been approved.
When did you submit it?
Larry handled that, and Larry, when was the submission date? I believe it was, the first round was a month and a half ago.
Yeah, it was in the beginning of January. I don't remember the exact day, but we did submit it. We had it done on time. There was multiple revisions that were requested, and we made the revisions. And so every time, essentially, they had comments, we then responded to the comments, and then responded to the comments. And now we have just a very small window of time left, and it wouldn't be feasible to.
You didn't think we would be approved, though?
No, I thought we might be approved. I mean, obviously, that was,
Then
the goal
to
is to be
me-
approved.
To me, if I'm filing for a grant and I think I'm going to be approved, well, then I'm going to put all my energy in getting the information for the grant application to be ready. So it sounds like we didn't do that.
Alls I can speak to is it is not approved. There has been back and forth, but the basic principle here is we're not approved as far as could we have put more information, more an effort into that, I guess. So I wasn't the primary on the funding source, more the commercial activity after, but I do know there's been a lot of back and forth with that funding source.
Well, I'm a little discouraged because I thought this would have been absolutely fantastic for our broadband initiative to pick up additional homes and get additional infrastructure in place with somebody else's money, but I guess that's not going to happen, so thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, final opportunity. There's 3 resolutions on for tonight. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay. Do you want to break down the resolutions for us then if they don't have any questions?
Yes, I will. The first is the acceptance of the Reconnect 4 grant and authorization of the chairman, you, to execute those grant documents. Basically, they are all the documents that came with Reconnect 3, the accounts, the acceptance documents. The next is a waiver of sovereign immunity, and I'll let Josh speak to this if I miss anything. For the Reconnect 4 grant security agreement, that is basically an agreement the USDA has to sign when accepting the grant. This is the wording and language that was recommended by the USDA for Reconnect 3, so we use the same language for Reconnect 4 as it's the same funding source and just an extension of that grant. And then the last would be a waiver of sovereign immunity to consent to jurisdiction to establish the DACA account to receive the funds, as those funds have to be separate from the current award that we are receiving for Reconnect 3.
Okay, all right. Kim?
I guess I don't know if this is a question you guys would like to answer, or maybe Isaac would, but, so based on when this was first presented to us and with not being able to obtain that grant, I guess what changes with that?
So I'll answer that. The only thing that's going to change right now from our current position is these grants were awarded, Reconnect 3, Reconnect 4. BEAD was always a consideration, whether we were going to apply for it, whether we felt risking the financial match was something that we felt feasible. And then now that we aren't an approved vendor, what will change about this is we will renegotiate the commercials in our current deal, and I don't want to get into any further discussion in open boardroom about that. We'll change the commercials in our current deal, our operating agreement with our partner due to this grant.
Well, since we're voting on this tonight, if we need to go into closed, I suggest we do that. I'd like to hear what's going to change about that, if that's something that you...
Yeah, I would recommend going into close then, but what I would also do is delineate that the BEAD grant has nothing to do with the Reconnect 4 grant. This wasn't a grant we were awarded. We're just accepting it. We were awarded this in 2023.
So in short, nothing
Yeah.
from us is being taken that we already received. We were crossing our fingers that we'd get a grant. We didn't get the grant.
Yeah, we didn't, that application hasn't even for BEAD. The window is open, so I believe that we're discussing two different things right now. I'm specifically discussing Reconnect 4. Reconnect 4 is an extension of Reconnect 3. We have an agreement with our operating partner to operate on this, and then what Isaac brought up was a future grant that can affect that agreement in a positive way, but it has nothing to do with this grant. But if we'd like to go into close, then I'd have no.
I don't think we need to, Kim.
Okay.
It is two separate grants, right? And we chose not to apply for one, and they can say for whatever reason, but we just weren't ready to apply for it. That's the bottom line. So what changes between us owning the fiber and somebody else owning the fiber? We get less of the lion's share.
Which was the
And
point
it's
to,
less infrastructure we have in place. Once you got the infrastructure in place, then you can generate more of a profit. You're not negotiation with a partner, right? Because you own it.
Yeah, but that is not pertaining to this grant. That is pertaining to, I actually have that in my,
That's what I explained, two different, we're talking
Right.
two different things. This is a lost grant, so.
yes, this is a good, and I have this in my next update to the board to discuss the BEAD grant, because there's more, there's probably a bigger discussion we should have in regard to that, but that doesn't pertain to this grant, nor does it affect this grant. And I guess any more, then we could go into close, and I will go into more detail as far as the particulars to the BEAD grant.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions before I turn to Lana about the broadband project in general? Like, has everyone been following along with what that is? Basically, the federal government wanted to increase connectivity in Indian country, so they created this grant that they're giving to Indian country. We're using ours to put in fiber, and then we're going to lease that fiber out to a different company that's then going to be able to provide internet services, and then we get a check at the end of the year. That's it in a nutshell.
right, which I understand,
Okay.
but I wanted to make sure that these grants that he's talking about, that then in the future are not going to, I guess, afford us that opportunity was my concern with that, right? So making sure that we're not just getting these smaller grants that in the end are not going to really pay out. So that was kind of where I was,
So, yeah,
when the opportunity later on, maybe with an additional one would have. I just wanted to kind of grasp what all that was going to look like.
yeah. And Kim, yes, it is all relevant. This builds off the Reconnect 3, which is a $24 million grant, allows us to go in more into a larger amount of residential neighborhoods. And then the secondary build out from our operational agreement would have our partners build off of this, which we have commercial residual agreements with. And then the BEAD grant that Isaac spoke of also will play a factor in that, which I would get into more detail as far as strategy and commercials. That would be something I think would fall more along the lines of proprietary business, and there's agreements signed in place. But that's just my feeling. But this is a grant we were awarded, a grant we have an agreement in place for, and this is something we received in 2023. We're just officially accepting it now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Lana?
Yeah, I guess when we have the conversation about the BEAD grant, my question would just be if that is, where was this tied into this one? Not at all. They're two separate. It's not going to help enhance this one? Not at all.
No, when these were applied for, BEAD had nothing to do with these. BEAD would have been in a way to build off this, and it still may be. But again, I guess we want to go
Could it
deeper
deter us
into.
if we don't receive the BEAD grant?
No, there's already a plan in place that we reviewed the financials for and the commercials for with just this grant in
But
place.
Lana, what it allow us to do is attach to more homes and generate more profit. So it was an important grant, but now we just gonna wait on our partner and then renegotiate to get some type of kickback for using our main fiber. It's like a main highway, right?
A check,
If
you mean?
Yeah, a main highway, right? So There's a main highway going down the road, and if you want to get to homes, you got to build a path to those homes. Well, the BEADS grant would allow us to build to more homes. We chose not to be ready for that for whatever reason, so now we got to rely on the check person to get a bigger check.
Okay, all right, thanks, Isaac.
Okay, any other questions, comments on this, guys? Okay, I appreciate it, guys. All right, so let's move on to our final item before we do agenda review, which is from the Facilities Department. And we're going to get updates on the Natural Resource Facility that's going to be built, the Hessel Tribal Center projects, and then the preventative maintenance agreements as well. So let's take just a couple minute break and then we'll get into that. Our final item, which is an update on facilities regarding who we're going to award the contracts to for the natural resource facility, the Hessel Tribal Center projects, and then who's going to get the contracts for preventive maintenance and total fire control protection. So Andrew, go ahead.
Okay, we'll start with the two construction contract agreements. We did bid both of these projects out prior to 12/31 of last year per the ARPA agreement, but we could not get it within budget. So that's when we did the internal agency agreements. We did rebid the Hessel project with the additional time. Again, we reached out to over, I think, 15 general contractors to get the project bid, and Randy McGahee was the only one on both attempts to provide us a price. And based on that price, we were able to do some valued engineering to get it within the budget. So this is just to award the construction contract agreement with them.
Okay, before we move on any further, any questions, comments on this? Isaac?
Hey, Andrew, on the valued engineering, what'd you cut out?
More of the decorative and going with more traditional building materials for siding, vinyl, going from architectural windows to more of like standard windows, going from, I don't know if you've been in the Escanaba Community Center building, but we tried to mimic originally the wood beam look of the dining room, and we cut all of that stuff out. So essentially, we are getting a standard commercial building.
As long as the cuts weren't in mechanical, I'm.
No.
Okay, anyone else on this one? Okay, let's move on to Nomad then.
Okay, and the same thing, this is for the natural resource building. We did bid this out. Again, it did not fall under the budget number. We did post it again, and again, we only had Nomad Construction bid on it. We did, again, valued engineering to get it under the budget, and we were able to, and again, this is just to award the construction contract.
Okay, any questions or comments on this? Isaac?
Hey, Andrew, is in this bid, they gonna pave the driveway?
That is in the bid.
Okay, the owners adjacent had indicated they'd pay for their share of that. Did you know about that?
No, and actually, because of the land disputes, not disputes, I don't want to overshadow anything, but we have been blamed multiple times that we're damaging the road going back and forth, and they've constantly pressured us to be the ones that pay for the damage. We do have our own drive that's on the property, so that is the drive that I am looking to utilize for the property, so that way we have minimal impact on the shared drive for that lot.
Who's making those complaints? Bev?
It would be Carpet Mart did it once, and then
Okay.
the plumbing company as well.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't Cora and Bay Mills. Okay.
No, we're down from them.
We're talking about natural resources, aren't we?
Yeah, where the 3 Mile building is, next to them,
So
to
next to
Cora.
the- next-
Yeah,
next to
it
them
would
is
be,
Cora.
yeah.
So that's why I'm wondering. So the
No.
neighbors would include Cora, the carpet company, and then the plumbing company. I just wanted to make sure Bay Mills wasn't running.
But Cora is pretty far down from us, the drive.
All right, keep going.
So, yeah, that would be it. We're looking to have our own drive into the building. We won't have to mess with them.
Okay, any final questions, comments on this before we move on to fire protection? Okay, let's move on to fire protection.
So facilities bids out every few years the preventative maintenance agreements for our fire protection systems, which includes our sprinkler systems, fire panels, our fire extinguishers, anvils and hood systems and whatnot. per insurance reasons. So this is to award the agreement. It did go through the purchasing policy, and we're looking to award the agreement to Total Fire Protection. We have dealt with them in the past. We have no complaints or no issues with them. So that's that one.
Okay, any questions or comments on this? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to your final resolution for tonight.
And the next one is to award the same type of agreement for our HVAC systems. Per safety requirements, we have to do our CSD1s for our boilers. Forced air furnaces have to be certified every year for childcare and health centers. So again, this is just to award an agreement for that.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Any questions or comments on this? All right, I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right, so the last item that we have is agenda review. Let's go on break so we can figure out which staff need to be here for it. Obviously, the people that presented earlier today won't be here because they already did. So a couple-minute break, and then we'll jump into it. Started. So we have agenda review, and then we have tasks to sign with Lana. So we've covered most of these at some point or another. So there's only 3 of them that we need to cover under resolutions, and we need to cover new business. So natural resources, they're either going to be on their way in person, or they're going to hop on Zoom. They have one that they have to cover because they already covered their other ones earlier today. But we can jump to required information for resolutions. That's going to be on tonight. And Directors Paymont, McKechnie, and Cosley put that on, so whoever wants to speak about it.
Yes, the dollar amount, if it's not in the resolution, it goes in the RIS with a reference in the resolution to see the RIS.
Yeah, that's. So. And again, if it's business or proprietary, all that complies with the parliamentary meeting rules of what's closed session items, it can be put in the attachment. And then what we do, and I shared this little secret with Lana, is we generally don't pass those minutes until after we've executed on a purchase or whatever. So then it can't be made public. So we usually will hold off on it and pass those minutes later. So then it does remain confidential until we pass the minutes, because it's included in the minutes. And that's important for the future, because if we need to do the research, it needs to be either in the cover resolution or in the attachment. Otherwise, in the future, they won't be able to figure out where the approval came from.
So I have a question.
Hey, Lana.
Yeah, I just 100% agree with Aaron. You know, this is what we did in the past. It worked a couple of different times in the last few years. I had brought it up, or others have brought it up, you know, that we have it in there. Aaron got back on the board, recognized it a while back. We have to legislate it and put it in there that it's going to be like that. But the one factor in this, it stemmed from the conversation that we had for the Uper Fitness Center, because the amount wasn't in there. I didn't know the amount, Kim didn't know the amount, so it couldn't be included. So I guess there'll just be extra research done if the board members ask for it, you know, that information will have to be in there. But I 100% agree. That's one of the things we did, and it worked. And reference, you know, 5 years from now, or none of us are here, they're going to know, and that record is going to be in the board office, because the more record that's in that office, the better for the future on what this leadership does. So there should always be the amount, and there should always, frankly, be an attachment with some history or whatever is the intent or the objective for that resolution. So, yep.
Okay, anyone else on this one? Aaron.
Thing, I guess, Christine and Bob will both remember this. We spent like 2 years, maybe longer, working on the RIS format. And in that process, we did include this as part of it, that the amount's either in the resolution or it's in the attached RIS. So we do attach the IRS for the board's purview, right? And usually we do have the amount in the IRS, but lately I have seen some RISs that have not had it. So that's all the more the reason that it needs to be memorialized either in the resolution or in an attachment that is forever tied to the resolution, so in our board records.
Okay. Anyone else?
Seems to be non-controversial.
Michael, then Isaac.
I agree that this information needs to be included. I get a little leery, though, that this will get lost again, though, that we'll do we do it, pass law on it, then it just goes away. So I'm wondering if there's a way that, not for this instance, because I think this is important, we need to pass it, but maybe start thinking about how we should be putting this in an ordinance, like the Open Meetings Act or something like RRS, maybe include a section in there. That way, we're changing code each time we do this. That way, it's not going to get lost to the wayside or anything like that. So I support it. We can do it as is right now, but I do think that's something that we should start looking down the road and say, let's change the ordinance, let's include this right in the ordinance, and then for next time or whatever, or even down the road, we know we need to clean it up. There's a lot of stuff that we need to clean up and put in ordinances. So I think this is a good example, one of those things that this is great, it's good. I just don't want it to get lost and buried. So we should be changing it in ordinances.
Okay, Isaac, then Aaron.
Hey, my big concern is if it's not in the resolution and it's in the IRS, what if those two documents get separated? And like, we're not going to be here forever. So is there a possibility that the very first page of the IRS could be the back page of the resolution?
So as far as when we scan them in,
Yes.
we do PDF them, and we're actually looking to get a student worker this summer to scan in everything and make that complete.
But then that way there, you'd
Yes.
never lose the dollar amount
Right.
versus the resolution.
Right. Yeah. It's absolutely possible.
Aaron.
So, all right, so there's a way to do that too, because I've been monitoring a lot of federal procedures, is anything that we pass that impacts how we practice, like our practice, should be put in bulletins. And then the bulletin should be dated just like resolutions. So the bulletin for this could be for this date. And then another example of where this would have been helpful is when Christine came back and when I came back, or I came back, then Christine came back, and we were told that there was a resolution or directive from the board to budget everybody at the, what was it, the mid. Yeah, at the min. And then we just practiced that for like a year till we found out there was no resolution that directed that. But rather than having to pour through all of the, the legislative history and all the resolutions, stuff like that we need to be reminded of more frequently could be put in a bulletin. And then those could be part of the official record, and then we just keep track of all the bulletins. Because this is something that, it will be in the official record, and if they know how to go and search for it, and if, they're PDF readable, they could find it. But we could have a running list of bulletins that describe how we operate ongoing as legislated, not just practice. So.
Okay, anyone else? Just want to make sure I didn't miss anyone. All right, let's move on to the next resolution.
Oh, I
Go,
wanted
Christine.
to say something. Is that okay? So the board did pass the RIS process just at the beginning of the year, so we have that as legislative action. We have trained staff on how to do it. It really hasn't been so much staff, it's been the ones that are just added to the resolution that don't have executive review, because they know they have to put it in the resolution and in the RIS if it's proprietary. But we did, at the last direct report meeting, go through this again and retrained and made sure that this is being followed. It's really up to when the executive signature's on there, they should enforce it and send it back. But I do like the idea of the bulletin, Aaron, that is important, because as you know, when we were trying to find out the legislative history of a lot of things, the board office never attached the plans or anything that was attached, and so a lot of that's missing. So when we go back to see what they pass, the actual plan's not there. So we got some work to do, and I can make sure from this end that I'll communicate that to the direct reports. Thank you.
Anyone else? Tyler?
I would just say, on here, I would add the CEO of Health and Human Service, or Health Services.
Oh, yeah, whoever I missed.
Yeah, because they would have proprietary information quite a bit on any kind of contracts or medical purchases. That would be my only amendment on that one.
I agree with that.
Whatever you guys want to do. All right, so let's move on to the next resolution, which is supplemental appropriations for administrative modifications for compensation adjustments. Aaron, if you want to cover that one as well.
Yeah, so this one came about because, and I was trying to find the original email, but Budget sent it. And the only thing that made me concerned with the way that it was being considered is I do support internal mods, because this is another thing we've worked on for many years. But I also don't think that we can delegate our appropriations authority. So, and I don't want to go back in time. I don't want to go back to the time where the administration had fluid sort of authority over budgets and they could just spend money and it was never appropriated. Because if you read our Constitution, only this board can appropriate funds. So all I did was to try to collaborate with what was being considered, which was internal mods for compensation. And I think what I saw from budgets was to go up to the mid, to be able to reconsider somebody's position that would have to go against the compensatory factors, so they can't just make it up. Someone can't just rewrite their job description and ask for a refactor, and it's got to go against our existing process. But it would appropriate $100,000 into a budget that then they could draw from that money to be able to cover the differential. That way they don't all have to come back to the board of directors, every time there's a request. So I just picked a number out of the blue, 100,000. Jennifer said that, where's Jennifer?
She's online.
Oh, Jennifer suggested that it doesn't need to be 100,000 because she doesn't think it'll be that much. She suggested, I think, 50,000. But all this would do is it would have us appropriate an amount, put it in the cost center, and then when the program manager requests up to the chain of command to change somebody's compensation, it'd have to follow all of our policies and procedures for compensatory factors. That's where the money would come from. They would be able to administratively approve it, and then they would have the authority to tap into that separate cost center to cover the costs for that differential. I also put in it that it would have to be reported to the board of directors on, I don't know if I said quarterly or routinely, so the board would be aware of that every so often. So I think it's an easier way to do it. I think it won't be happening a lot. So that's what I think.
Okay, Jen has some questions, then Lana, then Tyler.
Did you want me to speak before the board?
Yeah, that way we're heading in the right direction with this conversation, if you could.
I did contact Aaron last week just because obviously I had some questions. In the third whereas, I needed to define then key professionals. And then my other suggestion to Aaron was that instead of having this resolution is why don't we modify the budget policy itself? Because we have in there that when a vacant position occurs, allowed to budget to the mid for the position. And it doesn't specify whether that's tribal support. Do they have to come back for tribal support? That wasn't part of the suggestion, but I kind of wanted to hear that discussion at the board level because I wasn't completely clear on what I got what Aaron was doing kind of, then I didn't, so I was confusing myself.
You want me
If
to
that makes sense?
Yeah, you want me to, I'll tell you what. I'll call on the board members. If you have questions at the end of it, I'll call on you. Okay, Jen?
Appreciate it.
Lana?
Yeah, I completely agree with this one, too. I didn't necessarily agree with giving that authority over in the first place. It is what it is, and that's that. So I'm glad that we're putting some pavement to it. How are we going to get an email quarterly? Is the CEO going to, both CEOs going to present that information on a quarterly basis? How are we going to get that report to know how we are with the $100,000, who did it, what the justification is? And only say that, and it sounds like I'm getting in the weeds, but we can put it in a resolution, but if there's no procedure on how we're going to get that report, is it just going to be sent out quarterly? Because right now I have unless I missed it, I have no idea what we've spent to date or how we've got that information. Not saying we didn't get it, but I don't recall seeing it. I don't know if anybody else recalls seeing that. So how do we get the information now that that authority is given to the administration? I guess that would be my first question. And then if anybody knows where we're at with what we have spent to date. Because even though I support it, that may factor in other people's decisions on how they vote on it. And then I have another one, too.
You want me to take a step? I read the resolution, and I didn't really understand it myself, and I did go to budget and ask them what their understanding was on that. Now I'm getting a better understanding what your question was, because I think we brought to the board, right now it's done by budget and the board. So no one gets raises. We budget to the mid of the budgets for vacant positions, and I think that's what budget was asking the board. Are we continue to want to get their budgets authorized to the mid? Are we going back to the min? And that's kind of what Aaron was saying. The board authorizes that currently. No one gets to change that. You can only hire up to what you have currently in your budget. And if you don't have the amount of wage in your budget, then you have to do a budget mod and come back to the board to get the board up to approve that and authorize it. So that's how it's currently done. So no, you don't get reports because you guys approve it and you see it. So for example, if you wanted to hire an attorney, then, and you've only budgeted to the mid, but maybe this person qualifies to go beyond the mid, that's done in a budget mod and come back to the board, and the board approves that.
Okay. Has there been any retention increases since the board of directors passed giving the administration authority? Because it's for the new hires and for retention purposes.
Everything so far, this board has authorized any amount. So if it's a key employee, that's done in a motion, and so the board approves that. So,
But we never really changed from the normal process when that authority was given. Okay.
Nope.
Okay. Yep.
No.
I didn't know that answer, so there is no report. I didn't miss it. Okay. So it hasn't been a problem. And the only reason I ask is how the reporting was going to go is I didn't see any report, but there's nothing to report on anyways. So why do we really give the authority to do it if you bring it back anyways? Because it was a big hoopla about it. We got to give it to them for easier process and this and that. And
I think she was just only talking about the compensation study that you did approve and had that, and that's the internal mods, unless I'm wrong. Jennifer, you can correct me. But nothing that you passed has given us any authority to give people raises
well,
or
it
increases.
says right in the whereas here, from time to time, rely on the Sioux Tribe administration to facilitate and support compensation adjustments in hiring and retention of key professionals in the tribal employment. And I remember that resolution because obviously I wasn't in support of it because I remember in the past where, and I'm not blaming anybody in this room, but I remember in the past where compensation was increased without board knowing it. That was a problem. So.
Okay, I'm just not aware that you gave us that authority. This is a new resolution.
We don't have any authority to do what's being described until this passes.
Right.
So Aaron, go ahead.
All right, so I misunderstood too from what Jennifer sent me, or us, okay? Because I thought that the board did delegate for administrative mods to be done.
We did, absolutely, 100%.
Oh.
New budget policy that was approved last year gives administration the authority to do administrative salary up to the mid.
As budgeted, as authorized by this
As
board.
budgeted, okay.
Come back to you guys.
Okay, so here's the missing piece, okay? This is why it's confusing. So what we had worked on years ago was to delegate some authority administratively to do administrative mods. But what I didn't understand, because this, I think you guys approved this when I was gone and I wasn't here for part of the discussion, was that it sounded to me like we granted appropriations authority, which we cannot do. We can't do that because only the board has the authority to appropriate funds. So if the way you just described it, Christine, though, is that within the budget. Okay. So what I'm suggesting then, because I thought I was cleaning this up, but I still support dedicating a cost center to support the administrative mods in the circumstance, because I'm changing this now, where the funds aren't pre-budgeted. They would be pre-budgeted in a separate cost center, but they wouldn't be in that cost center for that position. And I'm talking something nominal. I'm not talking like a big giant amount. And I also put in the language, and we can tweak the language, that it has to follow our compensation policy. So it's not like all of a sudden somebody can say, oh, you know, I'm going to do my sweet talking, because that's how it used to happen. They used to have to go meet with the chairman and convince the chairman, right? And then once somebody got their raise, they told somebody else, and they went and did the same thing to the chairman. And some other chairman fell for it every single time, because I watched it happen. But, so I do support the convenience of administrative mods to a limited extent. So I do support an appropriations of $100,000, but Jennifer brought up a good question, is that it would have to be tribal support, because if it's already budgeted, that would cover if it's grant funded, because it's already budgeted, and they already have that authority to do that. But what I'm saying is, if it needs tribal support, $100,000, a budget for $100,000 that would allow the administration the flexibility to do compensations up to the mid, and use that tribal support, and then report regularly to the board what they did. So that's similar to what you already did, because you already granted the authority administratively up to the mid for funds that are already in the budget. So this would just, I guess, add tribal support up to either 50,000 or 100,000, so they would have that flexibility. They would still have to follow the procedure. It'd still have to be signed off on the chain of command. So.
Okay, Tyler.
The confusion came because I didn't understand what the board previously already approved.
Okay, Tyler, Mike, then Jen.
So I don't think we need another cost center. I think once the board appropriates funds to a budget, I think the board needs to allow for changes to happen internally through an administrative mod. For instance, you brought up grants. Even in federal grants, you can modify those federal grants without asking for permission up to 25%. At least it used to be 25%. I don't know if it's changed. Right, it used to be 10, they actually increased it to 25% to, as long as it's within scope and within the project goals and objectives. So even federal grants allow us to modify without asking permission. However, we make our own staff come back to us and modify or ask permission to modify. For grants specifically, they should have the authority to modify within the budget that we've already appropriated, because that's within their right, and that's working with the federal government, because we never actually go on to Grant Solutions or whatever platform they're using now to do those modifications ourselves. They're all done internally. They're basically just asking permission to do what they already have to do anyways, which is really just a waste of everybody's time. So grants should be automatic, up to 25%. I think for everybody else, we don't need an external cost center. We just need to give them the authority, even if it's like 5% deviance, to where they move money out of supplies or travel to give the pay that's allowed and appropriated to each position. Then we don't have to make another cost center. Then our managers are actually doing their job, and they're managing their budget based on what their needs for their department is. I think that's far more efficient than having another cost center. I understand the point of a cost center, but then it almost puts like almost this slush fund to like, well, we can give raises out of this cost center, instead of like having to review our budget and seeing what it is we really need to be successful, and let's move forward with these changes, and here's my proposal. I don't have to go back to the board because it's within 5 or 10%. So again, for all governmental services, first of all, I believe anything on tribal support should come back to the board, clearly. Anything that's within budget should be a 5 to 10%. Anything that's external with a federal grant should be up to the allocated amount that they're allowed to move the money around. So federal grants, 25%. That's my belief. I've been pitching that for a few years. Hopefully we're near the area. If we have to do another cost center, we have to do another cost center. But at the very least, I think we should address, I'll add them to the list. At the very least, I think we should address the grants that we have to make those more efficient, to make the hiring process more efficient, at the very least on the federal grants. But then we do have to come back around and address, like, making this more efficient on our staff, because we could appropriate it. We're not moving our appropriation away, but they're saying, well, this is what we expected we needed to operate. This is what we actually need to operate. I'm going to slash this out of the travel. I'm going to slash this out of supplies, and we're going to hire somebody in at this amount. You know, that's what day-to-day business is, without having to wait 2, 4, 6 weeks to get to a board meeting. You know, because we say that it's not difficult to get to a board meeting, get these changed, but then we got a data breach and it shut down the entire tribe for a month. So all things stopped for a month at that point. So we can't say that it's really easy to get things passed when we know that that's not the case, because we have to agree on it at the table and it has to be in a timely manner. So I think changes need to be made. I think they've needed to be made for a while, and those are my points that I would like to see cross at the very least. Transitioning those federal grants to allow them to have the leeway that they should have, and then for us to come up with a decision to either create this additional cost center or allow some leeway for administrative mods within their current budget. Yield.
Okay, Mike, Aaron, then Jen.
I agree with Tyler on this. I have some issues with this one only because I don't want to get into like a racehorse thing where people are putting in right in January and people who know how the system works are going to be rewarded. So I got a little leery of that, but I see why it's needed. But Tyler's suggestions, I think, that's been the crux of a lot of our problems is that. So if we can work on a resolution that accompanies that and addresses those issues, I think it'd be a more holistic approach in doing this. So I'll yield.
Aaron.
So I introduced it because I thought that we were delegating our appropriations authority, so I don't know that it is needed now. I like the idea of what Tyler suggested, but that is not in place right now, which would allow for greater flexibility up to the amount that each of the grants, because not all grants allow that. Some grants absolutely don't allow any flexibility like that. But I also don't want to get into the position what ITC was doing, is they were purposely underspending budgets for deliverables so they could give up to $20,000 bonuses to people. So they were cheating tribes out of service delivery. So that could apply here. So whatever we choose to do at a different time, not tonight, to allow greater flexibility to modify for compensation, it should come with an evaluation of what services are going to be interrupted. This is Lana, direct services are going to be interrupted by giving compensation increases. Because when we apply for those grants, we designate how much services are going to happen. And if we modify these internally just because we can, up to 20%, and it cuts services out, we want to know that. And I don't want to delegate that authority. So maybe we could delegate that if there's a clear means test the administration has to follow, so that we're not skimping on services in order to give salary increases. So I'm fine with cutting it for tonight. So.
All right, we're cutting it tonight, and then we'll just workshop it when you clean it up if we're going to bring it back.
Austin, can I just add something?
Yeah.
I can get the executive team together with budget. The reason I like this idea, because right now we are budgeting to the mid of all the positions. And so what we're doing is really overstating our positions in the times where we're going to need to look at reductions. If we were only budgeting to the mid and then follow the compensation practice, which I know is going to be on the next board's review for wage reviews, then we can adequately reflect our budgets as they are, and that would be the exceptions if you go above the min. So it is kind of going back to that, instead of budgeting everything at the mid, which would really overstate our budgets. So I'll put something together on that for the board.
Okay, Kim Lee and Lana.
Could you come back with an amount on what that looks like, what's kind of overstated? And that might give us a good idea as far as the amount.
Yeah, we
see
should
how
be
that
able
correlates.
to do that. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, Lana.
So now I'm a little confused. But anyways, the bottom line, since we passed whatever we passed for the budget mod policy, because Lana confirmed what I didn't dream, that we did pass that to give administrative authority, but it sounds like we haven't utilized that. So there hasn't been any increase to retain people administratively.
I have not, I can't speak for everyone, so I
And
can
that-
say, under my supervision, I have not increased anybody's salary.
Well, and that's the whole gist of my point in supporting the resolution, because I know that we did that, and I know that you haven't, but that doesn't mean we haven't administratively. So if there is any, I think the board should see that.
There has been nothing administratively processed to retain anybody. Anything that's been for retention has gone back to the board for approval.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was
Yep.
going to say, Jen sends
So we
that out.
passed something that hasn't even been,
Up to what's budgeted.
yeah,
That's the key.
yeah, okay.
I think that's the difference, is that you already appropriated the funds.
Right.
So anything that we've done has been already approved. We do the budget mod, send it to budget, and budget sends that report to the board, so you would have been notified on any of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any administrative mods processed are sent to the board monthly. That following month, if I process anything in March, you'll get it generally within the first couple of weeks of April, which I haven't had any for the month of March.
All right, thanks, Jen. All right, any final questions or comments on this before we move on? Okay, so let's move on to new business. All right, first item under new business is small mesh permit request. Lana?
So Mr. Campbell, not the police officer on the west end, but a Sioux Tribe member, Matt Campbell, has requested for the second year in a row a small mesh permit. So I did attach the resolution that tells us how we have to process these. Mr. Campbell did go before the Conservation Committee last year for approval of this because he hadn't had one before. But because he has had one, all I had to do was double check with law enforcement, make sure there was no major infractions that would prevent him from holding this, and there's nothing there. So he is absolutely eligible to receive this permit if the board approves it tonight, without the Conservation Committee being involved in the process at all this time.
Okay, any questions, comments on that? Okay, so we'll move on to the next item under new business, which is committee appointments and resignations. So 2 people are electing to be appointed to the Higher Education Committee, Cheryl Hammock and Curtis Babcock. Any questions or comments there? Hearing none, we can move on to Food Sovereignty Committee. Amy McCoy is requesting resignation from that committee. Any questions or comments there? Okay. All right, next up, honorary membership. Nicole Kangas was here before the ransomware, so a month or 2 ago, and she was disenrolled due to not having any Native American blood. I put on the agenda to give her an honorary membership, which is something that we discussed when she's here, and she's not going to be able to be here tonight, just due to the bridge being closed with all the ice. So any questions, comments there? Kim?
Okay, what if weren't we discussing about adopted children? And we were going to meet with have the enrollment committee discuss that we're not going to look into those anymore?
I have no idea.
Oh, that's right,
So-
you weren't here, you weren't here.
I have no idea, but I mean, if the enrollment committee audits a file and they determine that someone doesn't have Native American ancestry,
They won't qualify for that.
okay. But if they audit a file and they determine that someone's not of Native American descent, what do? Do they
I
turn a
think-
blind eye?
Could we go
Or do they
in
bring it in front of the
closed on
board?
this? Because we were enclosed when it was discussed, so just to fill you in. I'll fill you up, give me your ask.
Show you in.
I
Fill
am
you
waiting
in.
for the legal department to tell me when they're ready for code updates.
So Kim, as long as we're not talking about any specific names, like we can stay open.
Well, it gets pretty personal,
Yeah?
so I think we need to go into closed.
Okay, all right, let's go and close then. I have Mike and I have Aaron.
Are we in open?
Yep, we're in open.
So yeah, we did have a pretty healthy debate over this, and a couple things I'd like to point out. First of all, the constitution that was brought forward was a cookie-cutter constitution by the federal government that our founders had to accept to get us recognized. But if you look at the historical, the historical information of our tribe, you could look up, I would encourage everyone to read The Infinity of Nations, or to look into the life of Wabajig, who knowingly adopted non-natives, and they were part of our tribe. So the fundamental question is, are we a race or are we a sovereign nation? Because if we are a race, then blood quantum is going to qualify us. I don't believe we're simply a race. I believe we're a tribe. I believe we're a sovereign nation. And I can't think of barely any nations that make you take a blood test to be a citizen. So to think that we would not have progressed and we would not have laws within our sovereign nation that allowed adoption is absurd, because it happened before European contact, it happened after European contact, it happened before recognition. When a native family adopts a child as a baby and raises it as their own, they are a part of this tribe, and our codes should reflect that.
Amen.
We are not simply a race. We're not dogs. We don't need to prove our pedigree with a blood test. Within our Constitution, it gives this board the ability to develop code for adoption. I would argue that it would be more important for us to develop a code to honor the spiritual decision of a family to take in a child as a baby and raise it as their own, more so than to adopt an entire band that is not in our Constitution. So I think the fundamental question that every board member here needs to sit there and ponder: are you a race or are we a sovereign nation? If we are a sovereign nation, then we have the ability to determine our own membership and citizenship. And I do believe that when a native family brings in a child as a baby, raises it on our reservation with our culture and our values and our customs, that baby is a part of us forever, and who are we to deny it?
Okay, I have Mike.
I agree with Rob on this, but also I think that I've said at the two previous disenrollments that I've attended is that the committee and enrollment have to follow the membership code, and that the Constitution is interpreted by this body through the membership code. So when we intermix them, I think that gets problematic. And so the burden of proof thing that we've been discussing has been when somebody just goes in and tells enrollment, hey, I don't think this person's tribal, and then enrollment has to look into it. And I get that, but I also think that our code is pretty specific when it says that the burden of proof of removal of a member whose ancestry has been fully documented pursuant to 11.106 shall be on the person seeking removal. So I get why they do it, because they feel once they've been notified that they are then witness to that, and then they have to go into and look into that. But I would argue that our code is pretty specific, that it says they shouldn't have to go in and look into it just because someone says so. I think the burden of proof is on the person coming there making that claim. They should have to bring something in. I don't think our enrollment department should be viewed as this body to have to go and look for just based off of rumor mill. Now, if someone comes in with an actual evidence that suggests that that person isn't, or this whole conversation about birth certificates being a black birth certificate versus, and that's all it means is it's been amended. So just because it's been amended doesn't mean they were adopted, doesn't mean any of that stuff. It means it was amended, and our code doesn't say anything on anything further needed than a birth certificate. So if there's a birth certificate, that should be the end of it. But we've taken a different stance, and we've gone further, and we've disenrolled people because they've looked into it, and people have been forthcoming and said, yeah, I was adopted or something like that. And that's not what our code says. So I would follow most strict reliance on our code. And furthermore, I would actually like to see if the enrollment committee, like some of these people that have been disenrolled or looking to get disenrolled, there is an adoption mechanism in place. And it's people that are known to be Indians in that community, and you get affidavits from other ones. And I would like to see that being triggered more often in these cases, that if we did go down that road. I don't think we should even go down that road. If someone's just coming in and saying, hey, that person's not tribal, great, show us why, and then we'll look into it. If not, if someone comes and has, and this is the example I gave last time, a list of 100 people, they shouldn't have to have the ability to monopolize our enrollment tournament. Our enrollment tournament's very busy right now. We have open enrollment. We've had a lot of stuff on their plate. So if I came in there with a list and just said, I believe this list is of people, a bunch of people adopted, I shouldn't be able to monopolize enrollment department's jobs. So I've had issue with this. I've vocalized it before. If we want to move forward on an honorary one tonight, I'm perfectly fine with that. But we do need to do an overall look on how we are approaching adoptions. And as I agree with Rob, if someone was adopted as a baby and they grew up here, well, they're a member as far as I'm concerned too. And if we need to change our code to reflect that for enrollment and for the special enrollment committee to move on, then so be it. I'm okay with that. And then let us be the interpreters of the Constitution, because that's basically, at the end of the day, that's our job, to interpret the Constitution for them to do it. So I'll yield at that.
All right, so we have a pretty long list. I have, Lena, you spoke, right?
No, I got to speak.
But you put your hand up again, though.
Yeah.
So I have Tyler.
Nope. Earlier you announced Rob, Mike, and Aaron.
Okay, so Rob spoke already, right?
Yep.
Mike
And then
spoke already, right? So now it's you?
Yep.
Okay, so Aaron, Tyler, am I missing anybody? Okay, go ahead.
No, and just for the record, I saw that look over there, but you announced Rob, Mike, and Aaron earlier, so I'm not out of order.
It's not a big deal, we can just
I got
speak.
mine.
Yeah, you're
Okay,
good.
so what I want to say is, first of all, for the people who were complaining that we went in a closed session unnecessarily, including people online, our chair insisted that this is an open session. It's up to us to talk about it at a policy level. We do tend to get into specifics. So as long as we stay at the policy level, it is an open session. So that's the standard for closed versus open.
Do you mind if I speak on that, Aaron?
Yeah, not at all.
So if you go to the code, it's very specific about what's open and what isn't. It's chapter 96. So this is an open item. So what's been happening is anytime that we talk about something controversial, the board will ask for closed, and we don't know about it until we get into closed. Wolf hunting is a classic example.
Yeah.
People don't want to go on the record saying, hey, I support wolf hunting, but I want to gauge what the board thinks about this privately. So from now on, things that will be open, things that will be closed. Simple as that.
Right, and I want to say that I think that out of caution, board members thought they wanted to go into closed session to keep confidential any names or whatever, but it's up to us individually to keep it at a policy level, so we're not mentioning names. I just want to make it clear, we do not have the authority as a sovereign nation to enroll non-Indians in our tribe. All tribes have in their constitution the requirement that you have to have Indian blood. Okay, so that's a premise. We don't have the authority to flout federal law and enroll as bona fide full members somebody who doesn't have Indian blood. Now, adoptions, I don't disagree. No, let me say that differently. That sounds like a half-hearted statement, right? I agree that if somebody adopts a tribal child or a child and they bring them in and they raise them, in our culture, that is our way. there's lots of people who are enrolled that are descendants of foundlings. And what's a foundling? A foundling is a person who was born either out of wedlock or the family didn't have the resources to raise that child, and then a family took that child in, and they took that child in generally at birth, and most people don't know the difference. That child was raised as if it is that person's child. That is our culture. That's our way. So our adoption. So tonight, we're considering an honorary, okay? So the honorary is no pretense that they have Indian blood, right? The rules for honorary is that they aren't Indian, they're not otherwise eligible. That's what we're considering tonight. Our adoption code is specific to adoption in the tribe. It has nothing to do with adopted children. It's adoption into the tribe. And that's not really an avenue for somebody who, like, let's say, policy level conversation, let's say they were adopted into an Indian family, generally by the state. We do have adoptions in our own code now, but they were adopted. And if they don't have Indian blood, they can't be an adopted member of the tribe, because the premise in the adoption code is that you have to have Indian blood. We believe you have to have Indian blood. The affidavits that you go out and get, you have to get 7 of them, they attest that you have Indian blood. It's just we're not quite sure whose kid it is, right? We believe them to be Indian, but we don't know exactly whose kid. We have a lot of that in our tribe. The adoptions that I've voted on over the years, they were generally people that lived in our community for forever, but they're descendant of other tribes. And as an adopted member, so there is a distinction here. You don't have the right to run for office. You don't have the right to participate in treaty rights unless you're a descendant of a signatory of the 1836 treaty. And not everybody is, right? So what we potentially need to do is we need to amend the adoption code that allows for us to adopt people into the tribe, but if they don't have Indian blood, they will not be able to qualify for treaty rights or to run for office. So I think that's something we should consider. And part of this is I talked about it before, the bloodthirsty, we got to disenroll all the fake Indians. For all of that, we have disenrolled, I think somebody said 600 people in our whole history of 50,000 members. 600 people, the number of mistakes that might have been made, just maybe even honest mistakes over the years in the early days when we didn't have the sophistication that we do now, might have been mistakes. So if we could approach this in a kind and humane way to try to find a solution, I would support amending the adoption code that opens up for adopted children so that we can accept them as members, but like the adopted members into the tribe, we limit what that would mean so that they wouldn't qualify to run for office, or they wouldn't qualify for tuition waiver, blood quantum calculation. That should be the only reason why we ever do blood quantum calculation, by the way. And they wouldn't qualify for treaty rights unless they are descended from a signatory of the treaties. So that's it.
Okay, Tyler.
So I think we need to remain consistent. As I mentioned before, we have somebody on for an honorary membership tonight who had the exact same circumstances about 2 months ago, and we removed them from our enrollment. The problem is one of our board members is related to this person that we're discussing, and that's why there's a change of heart and a change of tone. So that we either maintain consistency and we do them all the same, or we go back to special privilege for family members and friends. And I don't think that's acceptable. Like, what are we supposed to tell this person tonight who, well, I mean, they can't make it across the bridge, but they get an honorary membership, but we're holding off everything else for anybody else that's discovered? So I understand Mike's point. The burden of proof, yeah, but we've been provided proof. We can't turn a blind eye to it. So we have documentation that the person was adopted. We know that they do not have any Indian blood. Currently, they're eligible to run for office because they're not disenrolled. they're eligible for Indian Health Services and all other services that the tribe provides. So there are issues that we need to address, and we either are consistent with our disenrollment, or it's going to look like you're doing special favors. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. We don't. We have the honorary membership for tonight.
Isn't it for the person for a month ago?
Right. The person who is removed. There was the last agenda had somebody else to be removed, and you had all asked for it to be not read into the agenda. No, it is not. But that's what we're discussing right now, and there's no consistency. So, like I said, the board either has to follow the rules and laws that are in place. We can amend them. We can fix the policy and the issues and the adoption code and all of that. But why would we change our position from one to another within a 2-month period? It's unfortunate. It's sad. It sucks. The person was part of the community. But we have rules and laws and regulations. And we're also, do we want to be the tribe that just lets anybody in, which is already something that people are trying to spread rumors about, that we're just letting anybody in? And I understand this is different, but so was the other one. So was the young person that we disenrolled that we're providing the honorary membership to. That person was special too. They speak the language better than most of the people at this table, yet we still moved to disenroll them because they were adopted into their family and they do not have Indian blood. And there's an exception being made for somebody right now, and I would like to know why we're pushing this off for this one person, because it's not consistent, and that's not fair and balanced, and it doesn't seem right. Because I would just as soon as push off this honorary adoption or this honorary membership and give this person their citizenship back if we're going to make an exception for the next one that comes through, or the next one and the next one. So that's my stance. I would just like us to be consistent with these cases. And when proof is provided to us, you can't put it back into hiding. The proof was provided to us. We're going to pretend it doesn't exist. We know that this person was adopted. Yield.
Lana, Rob, Kimley. Okay, Rob.
Okay, so the vice chair has some pretty good word mumbo jumbo there, and I'd like to mislead people, so.
Okay, we're not going back and forth.
Well.
No, well, we're not going back and forth. If you guys have a conversation to have it out in the hallway or keep it on track.
Oh, okay, well, I object to that, but so you're going to allow the vice chair to single me out like that?
He didn't single anyone.
We know who he's talking about. So I'm just going to go ahead and address it. You can cut me off if you want to. But first of all, the one we talked about last week was my cousin. But to be very clear, you could rewind the workshops from the previous one. I said the same exact thing. So don't act like it's towards one thing. You know damn well I said the same thing in the previous workshop. So don't try to mislead people like that. That's ridiculous.
I think what should happen, since it's a family member, is that you should recuse yourself from it.
There's no conflict. I don't benefit from it. And did I recuse myself from the previous one? Who wasn't my cousin? No, I'm allowed. No, I'm allowed to have a fundamental belief about something, and just because someone's my family member does not mean that that fundamental belief still does not exist. I said the same thing previously. Exact same thing. You could go watch the workshop. The exact same thing. So my fundamental belief is that when a Native family adopts a baby and raises it as their own, they are a part of our tribe. And it happened previously. Like I said, go read The Infinity of Nations. Look at the life of Wabajig. He brought people in and he said, you could read it right in The Infinity of Nations. He said, this is my child. They will be a part of our tribe forever now. And everyone accepted. Why? Because we're not a race. We're a sovereign nation. It's that simple. So all I ask is that when you want to phrase something as it's because it's a family member, look at what I said before. That wasn't a family member. Same exact thing. Don't be ridiculous.
You voted to disenroll.
No, I didn't. Actually, look up that too. I didn't.
Mike, then Aaron. I apologize. Yeah, I X'd you off on accident. Kimley, Mike, Aaron.
Well, I guess that answers that. I didn't know that it was anybody's cousin, so to make that exception, and I said, just because we've made a lot of mistakes in our past, does that mean we shouldn't revisit that and fix it? Not just making exceptions anymore, but let's address this and fix it, was why I had made a request to have that put on a workshop agenda and kind of pause, right? Because, again, now it's getting where people were looking for information and know, do we put it back in hiding or do we address it and move forward? And then maybe allowing some of those people that have been adopted in the past. My personal opinion is the federal government recognizes children who are adopted as your child. If my kid were to go do something wrong at the federal government level, I'd be held accountable, whether they were adopted or not. They'd look at it, that child is mine. So I do think that needs to be readdressed, not for an exception to anybody, but as an expectation of who we are as a people. So that's it.
Okay, Mike, then Aaron.
Kim stated a little bit about what I was going to state as far as just because we did something once that way doesn't mean that we should continue doing it. So if we got it wrong once, there's plenty of votes I've gotten wrong. Plenty of votes I've gotten wrong. But I'd like to think that we can learn from them and then readdress them. So I think what gets into this, though, is when we start characterizing motives. We shouldn't be characterizing the motives of somebody. And once we start going down that path, it's going to get personal and it's going to get ugly again. So we should make caution on doing that and keep it to the policy. With that, I'll just leave it at, I'll yield.
Okay, Aaron.
Okay, so I don't intend to pee anybody off, but there's obviously something else happening. There's some personal feelings involved in all of this. I do agree that we should not be voting on anything where there's a conflict of interest. I would not be voting on any disenrollments for immediate family, including first cousins or second cousins or uncles or aunts. I would not do it. That's my position. But the code requires the Constitution, if you have a personal interest, the board can vote to exempt you, so you don't have to volunteer it. I do think we should have a requirement that requires you to disclose if you have a potential conflict, and I do think the board should vote every time if there's a conflict of interest. I think we've gotten in trouble in the past when we don't do that. All right, I'll say that. I'll also say we went down a whole line of conversation just now, not at all germane to what's on the agenda tonight. So what we're talking about tonight is the person who was disenrolled a month ago who's applied for honorary membership. I had to look at it closely, I had to flip through all the documents because we just had a conversation about a person who came for disenrollment at the last meeting. That's not on the agenda tonight. It's not germane. We should not have allowed that conversation to happen, okay? Because it's not related to what we're going to do tonight. It can be if you contort it and you have a personal interest and want to tie it back and get a plug or whatever against whoever you're trying to make a point against, but it's not on the agenda for tonight. We're not considering anything about that person who most recently came for disenrollment and the board tabled it. That's not on for a conversation tonight. It's not for an action tonight. We should have had that conversation. It should not have been able to have been allowed to be used to impugn somebody else's integrity or how they're going to vote. So I do support what the board had a conversation, because right now we're in a quandary because there's nothing we can do. Enrollment had to bring it for disenrollment. We had to consider that one a month ago. We followed through on it. We followed the code. And then we had another one. We tabled that one. So until we get a fix, it's a hot topic. It's a sensitive topic. But it is not on the agenda tonight. So we shouldn't be having the conversation that's not related to what we're about to enact.
Okay, Kim. Yes, ma'am.
The reason I brought it up is if we're going to be changing the adoption code, what happens with this one if they're an honorary member? you know, that's why I brought it up, because it's like, do we want to table this until we do the work on the adoption code? And make sure we're following it consistently? So that's why I brought it up. I didn't mean to start this big old storm, but it was because I think we should hold off just in case we can
Well, say this.
retro what we did.
Yeah, so I'll say this, and then I think it's time that we move on. I do think that we have to be consistent, though. So one meeting we'll have, disenrollment hearings where the enrollment department will bring evidence that someone's not eligible for enrollment due to not having native blood, and then we do things differently depending on who it is. So the Constitution is pretty clear. Article 3, membership, the first sentence. The following person shall be entitled to membership in the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians, provided that such person possesses Indian blood. There's no flexibility in it. You have to trace your ancestry to one of the tribes. And being Native American is a race, it's an ethnicity, but enrollment in our tribe is a political status. Those two things are different. And if we discover that someone doesn't have a drop of Indian blood and we turn a blind eye and we allow them to remain members in our tribe, they're eligible for a lot of benefits that all of their descendants will get because we're a lineal descent tribe. So that would include preferential treatment on housing applications, on job applications, on scholarships, on treaty rights to be able to shoot 5 deer, and everyone, the descendants will as well. I mean, I could keep going on and on and on. The mechanism is honorary enrollment, not honorary enrollment, but honorary membership, where we tell that person, you might not have Indian blood, which our Constitution prevents you from being a member because of that, but you're still a member of our community. You're an honorary member. We're honoring you as part of our community. And it's just the way it goes. Until you amend the Constitution, it's just the way it goes.
So, Mr. Chair, just out of respect, you weren't at the meeting, and unfortunately, we're relitigating the argument that was on the agenda at the last meeting, and that's not on the agenda, so it's not in order. At this point, we just move on. If it comes back to the table, we should have that conversation, but, unfortunately, you weren't here, so you didn't have the benefit of all of that back and forth. The board took a step towards healing, because we know there's something that doesn't feel quite right about disenrolling somebody that's been an adopted family member. And we all see, and genuinely, I think we all want to find a solution to that. We have to have a full-throated conversation about that. But we're relitigating something on an agenda that's not on tonight. That was the last meeting.
That's fair. All right, I'm ready to move on if you guys are.
I got one.
Okay, go ahead, Rob.
Just to be clear, I had already told the individual that I would not vote on it because we were family, but no, I'm going to make something clear because someone impugned on my integrity, so I'm going to speak on it. I had already informed people I would not vote on that, but to suggest that you can't speak on something on a fundamental level because it's your family means that nobody in this room would speak about anything. Period. Like, you would just have to recuse yourself from every conversation. So recuse yourself from the vote, but if you have a fundamental ideology on something, speak.
All right, guys, let's move on. You can speak it, just make it brief.
Quick as I can go, Austin. So, I'm speaking about the name that's on the agenda for tonight. I was told that. So was this person described what an honorary member meant, like you just described, which was perfectly
At the meeting,
described.
yeah, where she
Okay.
was disenrolled, we mentioned the next meeting, we would have an item on to make her an honorary member. We described it, so she couldn't vote or anything like that, but she could continue to go to powwows, cultural workshops,
Okay.
all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
We just obviously couldn't have that meeting because of the ransomware stuff, so we're getting to it now.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, guys, let's move on to board concerns. Does anyone have any?
Jack's resolution.
Oh, Jack's resolution, sorry.
Poor guy's been sick.
Jack, could you cover your resolution for tonight, please? It would be apply for Great Lakes Fishery Trust Grant.
Absolutely. Thanks for giving me a chance. Jack Timkowski, I'm the Fisheries Program Manager at the Natural Resource Division, Wendigan. This is an opportunity to apply for Great Lakes Fisheries Trust Funds. This is a cooperative project The Nature Conservancy is a PI. The Sioux Tribe is a big part of this project, and it's looking at understanding how to best reintroduce lake whitefish to stream habitats.
All right. Any questions or comments for Jack on this resolution? All right, thank you, Jack. Appreciate it. All right, does anyone have any board concerns for tonight? Going once? Okay, Tyler, do you have a form filled out?
No, I'll just fill it out tonight.
Okay. Do you want to cover it now? So we can get people on the road on time?
Yeah. My board concern is the lack of culture assistance on the West End. Again, Stacy has recently put in her 2-week notice and has left, so we don't have a West End cultural coordinator. To be honest with you, I don't know if that was fully working anyways. I think Stacy did a great job because she's Stacy. I don't think a new person coming in would do as good of a job. I've requested that as they review elder workers in the future, perhaps we could get one in Unit 4 and Unit 5 to maintain some of our cultural requests. But right now, we were left with planning 3 or 4 workshops and a powwow, and we're left without any assistance, or actually, we don't even have the information of where we're at with those and who had agreed to what. So could really use some help. You know, we had things going. I used to take care of these things by myself, but I relied on somebody else at this point, and now because I did that, I have none of the information. So I'm desperately in need to keep these workshops moving forward for our cultural activities. I mean, we still have our biweekly culture night. That's an easy thing for us. But the rest of the activities are on pause, and we can't really stop a powwow. We need to keep planning it. So I need some kind of assistant, whether it be a cultural coordinator like Stacy was, an elder worker, or some kind of community member that can get hired in quickly, because we need somebody over there. And I'm sure Kim Hampton can vouch that she's probably in the same situation.
Okay, any further discussion on this, guys? Jess is obviously in the back, and she's taking notes and everything. Culture's under her.
And education, I think Stacy was way.
Jess, has that position been posted yet?
Yes,
I know
it's
Tyler's
posted.
concerned that it might not be enough, but have we gotten applicants? Have
It's
we-
posted, and we did receive an email from HR that we do have one applicant, so we'll be scheduling that. Our director is out of the office next couple days for a family bereavement, so once she returns, we can get those scheduled.
Okay, thank you. Lana?
Yeah, and I agree with Tyler that, you know, Kim and I actually have to head up, you know, both of our powwow committees in our area, because we've, you know, really never had any kind of, you know, on-site or Unit 2 emphasis on culture. We tend to go where we have to go and do what we have to do. And I know that Tyler and crew do, when we ask them, they try to coordinate anything that they can with the time that they have free. And I think that, you know, in the future, and it's nothing new, but when we do hire cultural people, we, you know, to work in that department, it should be with an emphasis on all 5 units. I know that, you know, the stuff is up here and there's a lot of people up here, but the structure for our cultural department is really only vested with the Sault Ste. Marie area. They can't stretch so thin. And I call the cultural department and say, can you help us do this? Absolutely, they say, but it's going to be based on what time they have. So we have to get really a lot better about that when it comes to that department. And I understand that, you know, there may be changes in there in the future. You know, hopefully that is taken into consideration. What Tyler just mentioned about his area, when he alluded to, you know, Kim and Larry's area, the same with Unit 2 and probably Unit 3, you know, so, and like I said, there is a lot to do up in Unit 1, and they do what they can, but other units do need that structure as well. So you know, he put the plug out there, I'm going to seal it with that. It needs to go around. And we've had discussions this afternoon on, you know, all kinds of things when it comes to our cemeteries and all that. I think we need to get a lot better on our prioritizing our programs and our services to focus on those things with the existing stuff we have in place. So, yeah, I agree, and we need it too.
Okay, anyone else? Tyler? Bob?
I'm glad this is brought up again because there's a very easy solution for it. It's called cultural enhancement funds. This was supposedly the reason why these funds were put in place. They are in place. Each unit is designated 1% of hotel tax dollars that is directed by the board members of each unit. So if we're looking for ways to fund and have it more efficient, I would say that perhaps it would be much better to put those funds under a designated tribal department like culture. Because if you look at our culture department, there's, what's that? You got something to say? Okay. If you look at our culture department, there's no way possible with the resources that they have that they're going to be able to adequately provide culture to all 5 units. That supposedly the fix to that was to initiate the cultural enhancement funds. I would be interested to see how much each unit gets, because if you're looking for someone to coordinate culture in your unit, there's probably enough funds in there for you to hire someone. And if not, then maybe we should direct those funds to an appropriate department, so that way board members do not have direct access to that. It's never voted on in an open meeting, and it's never reported to the members. It's not constitutional. So I think we need to fix that, and if we want to go down this road of saying, I need more culture in my unit, how much money you got in your fund? Hire someone.
I totally understand what Rob's saying. However, I'm going to say it again on the west end side, it's completely different. Cultural enhancement funds is what is used for our culture nights, for any workshops that are put on, anything like that. But we run into the problem of who's going to organize that? Who's going to be there as these workshops are happening? Before Stacy, I can tell you exactly who that was. That was me. I was the one running those culture nights. I was the one running those workshops, scheduling, finding people. And then Stacy came and I was like, oh, thank you. She really took over a craft night. I could still go if I wanted, but I mean, she was doing the organizing of the workshops. And like Tyler said, she's gone. And now I'm like, oh my God, how? And I'm also the chair on our powwow committee because we don't have volunteers. So I'm like, how am I going to manage to have all of this stuff go on again? I was finally able to breathe. And yes, our cultural enhancement funds are used for them and continue to be, even with Stacy in that role. But now it's like, we have nobody to organize anything. We don't have, anybody to do anything. So it literally does fall on board shoulders to do everything. Our end really sucks, I'll tell you that. It falls on me, Larry, Tyler, for the whole West End. I mean, for really, like I said, anything. So I don't know. I hope that this person who's possibly going to be interviewed is going to be good. It's going to take a lot, but we definitely need it. I just am afraid that they're still not going to step into the shoes that Stacy was doing. But that's also my concern too, is the same as Tyler's. So thanks.
Tyler, then Lana.
Yeah, we truly need, because Manistique's 2 hours from Marquette. It's an hour from Munising, hour from Escanaba. We truly need somebody in Munis, or somebody in Unit 5, somebody in Unit 4. Because even your area comes into my area, but I consider that part of Unit 4 part of my unit. Those are all our people, and they come to all of our activities in the Marquette area. So Gwyn, Nagani, Ishpeming, they all come to our activities. Actually, half of our events are Unit 4 people in that area. But using the logic that was mentioned earlier about, putting everything towards the culture department, and the problem would be solved. But the problem is the tribe invested the money through tribal support into the cultural services for the entire tribe. Yet those are not making it over. They're clearly not even making it over, 45 minutes over to Lana and Kim Lee's area. And a majority of the funding that Stacy was utilizing was earmarked from the culture funds that we had for Unit 5. I authorized her to use up to X amount as long as she got my permission first to make sure it falls in line with what people are asking for and that it's legitimate to our area and that we're not pulling in somebody that we don't have the ability to do within our own unit. But the answer is not putting all of the money towards culture because it will just end up in the same spot with more money going towards just Unit 1 activities. So, like Kim mentioned, we need help. We need somebody to coordinate. That person is just one person, but in their absence, somebody else needs to step up. Because the culture department is supposed to serve the entire tribe, is it not?
Yes.
Yeah. So and that is the tribal support dollars to support the entire tribe. So, the attacks on our end saying we have to give this money back because we have a cultural department and that's going to just fix everything, it clearly hasn't worked. What we had was working, but having a one-off employee also doesn't work. Because if we had somebody in Unit 4 and Unit 5, we would still be able to continue the programming until we got somebody else onboarded. It's just unfortunate because we really built a great community and we started really building great activities. People were showing up to all these events. We have so many drums out in the community. I just don't want that to stop, because people are really excited. They're really looking forward to this. And the plan was to get people regalia this year, kind of ease them into it and start these regalia making workshops so they can be a part of our powwows and part of our community in more of the sense that they feel like they're part of it. The first step is getting them involved and having them understand who we are, where we come from, and some of our activities, and that part is kind of complete for us right now. Now it's trying to get people more involved and more feeling like they're part of us, and that's where we're struggling. So it's an ongoing issue. It is a concern, but we're dealing with it. The problem is the lack of communication and the lack of follow through. Like, where are we at on all of these projects? Who are all my contacts? I need to follow up with these people to move this stuff forward. So I have to figure this out. And then, beyond that, the powwow is a pretty big deal in August, and we need to move forward with planning that. So either we need a Zoom available to us so I can get an immediate meeting on the books. We had somebody in Munising step up just today. They had messaged me. They're going to help host a meeting in 2 weeks. On April 16th, we're going to have a meeting, but there's some people who are unavailable, so we're going to need a Zoom for the people who aren't able to make it in. And that's just, a couple of the many things that we're working on. Luckily, for the culture night, we have an entire drum group and we have 3 people aside from myself that when I'm on the road, they step up for me, and I don't have that for all of our other activities. And it's great to be able to rely on your tribe to take care of the tribal issues, but we also need a little bit of support, on the internal side too. Like it can't just be on our communities on their west end, because if we pass away, we move away, something happens to any of us, like all of that stuff stops and we don't want it to stop.
Okay, Rob, then Aaron. I'm sorry. Lana.
Thanks, Rob.
Lana, hold on a second. Let me get this list straight. It's been a long day, guys. Sorry. Lana, Rob, then Aaron. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to say right now, and I haven't heard anybody say it, but just to be clear, nobody's attacking the stuff that Cultural does already in Sault Ste. Marie in that department. They do, again, when we ask them to do something, they try their hardest to accommodate, and they're just spread thin and they cannot accommodate. So I want to make that clear, that there's not enough people there to to accommodate 5 units, just isn't in the cards. I hope that we can look at that maybe for 2026, because if there was more staffing there, we could actually take recommendations from them and use that cultural enhancement funds in order, if they say, we want to do this or we want to do that. There are so many tremendous things that we've done in Unit 2 with those enhancement funds. I could just rack them off. It doesn't all go to just cultural teachings. We bought bleachers, we've done construction, we have feasts, things that the cultural division cannot accommodate in our unit. Yeah, true enough, Kim and I, we organize, we cook it, we clean it, we pick it up, and try to get volunteers, and that's okay, because that gets us out there. But it still doesn't underline the fact that, we do feel amiss sometimes that that's not included with the division. And then when we do certain things, if they don't agree with the people that we have involved, those people get attacked, and that's not fair either. So then you have to back up for that. Allowable costs. I didn't realize that Unit 2 could hire a cultural person to do those things. I guess I didn't know that certain people were using cultural, and I don't.
You don't have the authority to hire.
Right. We can't hire a person with those cultural enhancement funds, can we? I mean, I would never even have thought that. It's for culture. I mean, you may say it, Rob, but that doesn't mean it's allowable. I would never fathom to hire a person. I don't supervise people. I don't manage people. So that's just not something, excuse me. That's just not something that is in my scope. Once they do an agreement and I send the information to Lana, there's expectations that they exhaust that agreement. And if they don't, then there's questions. So I'm hoping just to move on from this. And I would encourage anybody to look at Unit 2 and look at our enhancement funds. It's all been very good things that our communities needed. Bleachers, constructions, teachings, feasts, and bringing the community together. And if we didn't have that, there'd be a big fat zero of things in our community, and not because they don't want to, it's because they don't have the ability to get there. So I want to say that, because it doesn't work, it's broken. And the threat that money is going to be taken away from us somehow, some way, is very stressful, because it does enhance a lot of things, education-wise as well. So I wanted to make that comment. So just to be clear, when it said that we can hire a person and have them do our culture, that is not accurate.
No, you can't hire a Sioux Tribe employee. You can contract with someone.
Right. Okay. I just want to be clear on that, because if that'd be a very easy fix, but it's not. So I wanted to make that comment. I'm done.
Jess, do you want to say something before I call on anyone else?
Yes, just a couple things that hopefully will help assist with some of these concerns. So for the FY25 budget, we did add another cultural coordinator position that would cover the Unit 2, Unit 3 area. I do like Tyler's idea of having one for each unit. So if we wanted to add 2 more coordinators to that budget, we could definitely do that and bring that forward for review. We also did add additional activity funds, because I know one of the concerns on the western end was it was hard for her to get the funds to the department. So we did 5 different line items. So each unit has their own set of funds for different activities. And then for the powwow budget, the one that has the individual powwows, like the Escanaba, Manistee, Hessel and such, we basically made those all equal. So I believe it was don't quote me, but $7,500, I think, for each powwow. So I know that was a concern in the past too, that some were,
4,700.
Yeah, but now I bumped it up though for 25. So, because I know 4,500 probably doesn't go very far. So just wanted to give that information. So if we want to bring those budgets, prior to Schedule C getting approved, I could work with Jen and get those brought forward.
It sounds like the consensus, if you can bring those forward before C, that would be appreciated. That way we can get those positions filled.
Okay.
Okay, Aaron, then Rob. Mix it up. I'm awful. Rob, then Aaron.
Okay, let's be clear. Contracting is hiring. So if you contract someone for $1,000 a day, you're hiring them for $1,000 a day. And to say that you can is absurd because there is no checks and balances to these funds so long as you have a majority of board members in your unit to say yes. So if you have the funds and you want to contract someone or hire them for $10,000 for 6 months to coordinate everything in your unit, what's stopping you? Don't say you can't do it when you know damn well you can. And I've never suggested taking money away from the units. Actually, what I suggested was keeping the 1% dedicated and obligated to the units, but have it done through a responsible and accountable way through an actual tribal department, not by board members who get to choose who, what, when, where, without ever notifying the members, without ever publicly voting on it, without ever reporting to the members what you spent. Tell me what government that would be acceptable in other than ours. It's not right. Everyone knows it. It's been used over and over to create political allies. It's been used over and over to have people attack incumbents or candidates running for office. Why? Because there's no reporting mechanism to the members. So what I suggested is if we want 1% of hotel tax dollars to remain in the unit, we could easily have a resolution that directs the funding to go through the culture department and have those earmarked for each of your units, which you could get with the culture department and help assist and plan based on the needs of your unit. I don't want to take anything from your unit. I want to create an accountability measure to where all our members, A, get to see it voted on in public, per the Constitution, per the code. B, have a reporting mechanism that our members know exactly what we spent these funds on. And then the idea of an argument that says if one of us goes away, it all goes away, well, that's a good reason to have it under a tribal department. Because if you look at the accumulation of these in some units where nothing was done with them for years because the director in place didn't do anything with them, and then another director comes along and is good with them, we're essentially saying that the people in your unit have to depend on you to win an election, to have cultural enhancement in their unit. That's not right either. So, I mean, we could take a look at the numbers. Bob, do you have numbers offhand on how much each unit was given in cultural enhancement funds annually? I think that needs to be reported to the members. So,
I think we do put it in the tribal paper.
so no one's saying take money away from your unit. What I'm saying is take the unchecked authority away from every board member. It's wrong.
Does anyone else have any other board concerns for tonight?
I have one.
Oh, Aaron? Sorry, go ahead, Aaron. Hoping we can
You're a
move on.
young guy, too.
I'm just pretending I forgot. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is similar to the last conversation we had because it's kind of deviating from, I think, what originally was brought forward, which is cultural support in units. But it's similar to the repatriation conversation because we're developing workarounds because we can't depend on this activity coming out of our cultural division. The reason why we created the budget to do the equal share and out of the tax to do additional supplemental cultural is because we aren't doing it otherwise. We might be doing it for an audience right here, and I live right here, so I kind of appreciate it, but we were neglecting Marquette and Munising and Escanaba and Manistee and Newberry. Newberry and Hessel are volunteer efforts. Those powwows have been volunteered, and the youth powwow, and then some other areas we've had powwows that have been volunteer, and they ebb and flow, so sometimes they don't happen. St. Ignace hasn't had a powwow. I don't know how long it's been, but the money's been there. We've had money for Mackinac Island to have a powwow for many years. So here we are again, trying to figure out a workaround because we have a cultural division, but we can't depend on the activities to come out of the cultural division. So if it means we need more staff in culture, then, why are we, I grew up in an alcoholic home, and it's called walking on eggshells. You don't want to confront your drunken father, so everybody's got to kind of, don't talk to dad right now, got to kind of be careful. We have a problem with walking on eggshells because we should have a strong cultural division. We have, and we know that the problems we have in society with substance abuse, addiction, overdose is related to historical trauma. So what's the solution? To afford those resources and cultural activities and language back to our people. So this should be like our main goal and our main objective that we commit to. But instead, we're trying to find workarounds. We're trying to piecemeal together, and I do think we need to improve, similar to what Rob's saying, but I also don't fault people who are taking the initiative and going out and finding cultural people to put this together, because we're not doing it centrally out of culture. And so it's not only teachings and stuff that you guys are all doing on your own, volunteering, and that's to your credit that you're doing that. But it should be completely part of our purpose. I don't say mission anymore because we're mission schools, right? It should be our purpose as a tribe. So we should have that vision internally. And I can tell you, when Kathy and I pushed to create the cultural committee in 1998 and the cultural division, it's because we were not satisfied that we weren't doing what we should be doing as a tribe and providing the support centrally. So we need to fix that. So in the meantime, I think we should have as great a flexibility as we can to support the volunteer efforts that board members are doing in their unit, because if they weren't doing it, if Tyler wasn't doing it, if Kim wasn't doing it, I don't know what happened. I think you got elected. I think that's what happened. And all of a sudden, all the volunteers, that were involved quit. So I thank you for not letting that just die on the vine and picking up. That's what I was trying to figure out. Wait, this is the third annual? Because I've been to many, many powwows there, but it's because of that. And it shouldn't be dependent on the board members that are elected. It should be our tribal purpose. So that's it.
Okay. Kim, would you like to talk about your board concern?
Yeah. I had the concerns that we've already talked about, but I also have another concern. I've been getting contacted by a lot of people, but I can think of 6 individual tribal members in the Manistee area right now who are 100% homeless. We don't really have the resources over there. So I have people ask me, so-and-so is homeless, what are their options? All we have is the program through ACFS where they can get like their first month's rent paid for. Well, that's not going to help you when we have no rentals. Like, we really have no housing options. So these people are actually going to our local churches and other nonprofits to get financial assistance to be able to stay in hotels and or bunking with people. We need more resources over in Manistee to address the issue of homelessness. Yes, Lana? Yeah. So obviously that, I forgot to write this down too. We also need, I'm sure it's probably applicable to every unit, some sort of, work group, something, because I have had it happen numerous times as well since I've been on the board, is people get a hold of me after hours. It'll be after hours on a weekend, a long weekend when we have one of those tribal holidays, and the tribal holiday falls on a Friday, and a house fire happens on Thursday night. And in the Manistee area, I can tell you, people will say, well, get a hold of the Red Cross. I am the only Red Cross person on that area. I can't go by myself. So we can't dispatch Red Cross to go help people. So when they're tribal, it falls on Kim, what can you do? I have paid for multiple hotel rooms on weekends just so families have some place to stay. We don't have a group of people who's going to be, okay, this person, just had a house fire, they have this going on. Because we don't have any of those groups like the Red Cross fully staffed over on that end at all. So it's like, for tribal members, we should have some sort of after hours where this group of people does have availability for funding to where this tribal member lost their home. And they can, put them up in a hotel for the weekend until the Monday rolls around and they can try to figure something else out. We don't. And I think that we need to. I just don't know. Like, I have thought about doing it. Like, how do I get a pool of money, start fundraising through my unit, West End, to be able to do these things? Why I'm one person? So I don't know what kind of options, or if it's going to take additional budgets or what it's going to be, but we needed those additional resources. We just do. We have nada.
Okay, Lana.
Yeah, I hear everything that you're saying, Kim, and, I do want to say that, we do have our emergency needs program too, and I don't know, that can come back to not having a staff on the weekend when it's needed. And some of the things that we have to get better at, and those are the things that you should be able to tap into easily. I know it's only $500, but that would pay for those hotel rooms and that information, and we're not good at getting that information out there to members. We had a discussion this morning about an additional specialist at the Lodge of Hope, and we're going to, I think that's on the agenda tonight to vote on. And we had a long discussion, the board of directors, because they have one there, they want to hire another one. And we talked to Megan about possibly putting in the job description that she would focus on other units as well, because there's 21 people there that they work with. Can they enhance that and make it so that they're utilized for all of the units to have, someone work with them for housing issues? And I had asked the question about resources that those specialists do have, and Megan said she was going to put that on our website, so that the average tribal member can just click on there and see the resources that we're using as a tribe in order to combat that homelessness. And then the chairman did speak up and say he has a list of those places, in his box too. So all that information can go on there, and that's kind of what we're lacking. So this one or two man show in each unit, it's been like that for a very long time. And there's simple fixes to that. There really is. Putting that information on the website so that we can refer them to the website, and say, here's a list of resources. If we have just something as simple as, and I'm not trying to do their job, but something as simple as our emergency needs program. We have all these cell phone numbers right there out there. Well, let's keep one of those and give it to somebody so that they can be called. If there's a fire on a Saturday night, we can pick up the phone and say, hey, we need an emergency needs person here, and they can pick, those little simple things to be proactive instead of reactive. And I feel I've been through it all. So, yeah, and I don't know, you might have been driving and you might have missed that conversation with Megan. Yep, so maybe that's going to be a little bit of a fix that way, but I did want to say that. Thank you.
Aaron.
Created the staff created the Dress Down Fund to be able to help people out when they were turned away, or when they just can't get through to somebody, because we have a 9-to-5 approach, and fires don't happen on schedule, right? People's needs don't happen on schedule. Nobody's assigned to work after hours on stuff like this. And so that's a need that has persisted, and we've done workarounds on that again. But, people, when they need help, they need it when they need it, not on schedule. So maybe we can think about assigning some, on call for emergencies. But I don't know where we're at, because that's not formally part of your job, but that's the way it was handled out of the board office, the dress down. Is it still happening?
Ashley and I are both a part of that committee, but this particular fund, to my knowledge, does not and has not ever helped in any situation other than emergency medical appointments. And the only amount, we approve $100, each member or employee can get $100 in a 12-month period, but we changed recently. If they have to travel, say, to Ann Arbor, to Marquette, they have to stay overnight, we will approve up to $150. But there's not, this, we've had people ask for, they've had a fire But that is not part of the guidelines, and I inherited it, so I don't know if it's always been that way. I'm assuming it has been.
No. How long were you on the dress down committee?
Since I started this job in June of 2023.
Something changed.
So.
Because it used to be much broader than that. And the reason why we create, not we, well, it was we, because I was kind of part of the staff at one time. The reason we created it is because of the rigidity of income guidelines and paperwork and intake work and all of that. And there's times when we've given people $500. We've helped people with hotels rooms, with food.
So I know when my mom passed away in 2013, it was $250, but that was only because I had to travel because she was in the hospital. It was only $250 was the max then, and then it slowly started going down. So that was back in 2013. There's another ACFS program, I believe, right, Jess, for emergency needs? So that may be the other one, but this particular one, since at least 2013 has been.
Hey, Aaron, could I jump in here?
Yeah.
All right, so I've worked social work basically everywhere you can work social work in this area along with other states. So the solution is you mandate that people in ACFS, specifically the direct care workers, take turn being on call. It's just the way it works. Hiawatha Behavioral Health requires their workers to be on call. MDHHS does. The social workers at My Michigan, that's just the way things operate. Next thing, you're going to need resources because the funding sources that were cited are going to be sadly insufficient to be able to provide actual help for people. So it's $500. It gets you 3 nights in a hotel. That's a Band-Aid. What you need to do is get money from the Housing Authority, period. I mean, I can't say it on camera how much they have, but it doesn't take a whole lot of homework to figure out how much they have. And providing services for homeless people, those are housing services, and that's why our Housing Authority exists. They've fought with me tooth and nail on covering the homeless shelter, but they can afford it, and it's a housing-related service. So if you want to put together a resolution, obligate so much funds per year to them, and then, have that direct care worker who's going to be on call have control of those funds, I will co-sponsor it. But that's your easiest, quickest fix to that. So 50 grand, 100 grand, whatever, we know how much cash is in there.
What if we buy like a multifamily unit in each unit or each area to use as housing for homeless or imminent homelessness?
It's possible.
That would be like 5 units, that's probably like $1 million in housing, that's barely a drop in the bucket to what they have.
This was mine and Austin and Betty's proposal when we first got our restaurant funds.
So for your information, Kim, before we started the homeless shelter, ACFS would put people up into hotels. Usually it was a Skyline motel, which isn't nice. You don't want to bring children there. And the voucher would last about 2 weeks, which isn't long enough to get on your feet, but it's longer than what those funds would be able to provide in a house fire. But I'm serious. If you want to put together a resolution, I got your back on it. So. Tyler, you have a board concern? You want to speak on it or no?
The other one I wrote down, it's been addressed already, but I just kind of want to make it out there and clear that when a federal agency is coming to our area for any kind of listening session or consultation, and 5 Sioux Tribe employees are CC'd on an email, and I hear from an elder about it, that's not good. Our primary job as government officials is government-to-government relationship and to be present at these things. So just want to throw that out there that, our liaisons, our tribal staff, whenever something looks like it's going to be consultation, listening session, or tribal input session from a federal agency, the board members and the chairman should be notified so we can either attend or make sure somebody's in attendance that represents the tribe. I know that the divisions are all trying to make sure that their people are there, but our literal role as elected officials is government-to-government relations. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, that from here on out that we get notified on these things that are happening in our area, because it was kind of wild to find out from an elder that this is happening in the Munising area. And several people knew and nobody had notified. I searched through emails. Did not have any email on that aside from there. So it's been handled since then, but moving forward, again, number one part of our job, government relations. So.
Okay, you guys got that back there? Okay. I think Aaron had a board concern. Does anyone else have a board concern for tonight?
You better wait for Aaron.
His is right here. He's inviting people to sign on to a resolution to mandate that we schedule our constitutional review sessions. He wants them on Mondays from 1 to 7. If you're going to approve that resolution, please include, with the exception of committee is on, because we can't be in two places at once.
Okay, so he's basically asking for people to join him in the next meeting.
And he
Or-
sent a draft resolution.
Not meeting, but, okay. All right,
Mondays, Lana.
okay.
All of them.
I have school boards, and I'm not going to skip the school board meeting, I'm sorry. Third Monday.
Okay. All right, guys, any other board concerns for this evening? And we can ask Aaron if he wants us to circle back on this when he's in the room. Okay, guys, let's go on recess unless we hear back from him. And we'll be on recess until the meeting starts at 5 o'clock.
The recording has stopped.